Snow draped the ruins of Winterfell like a burial shroud, smoothing jagged stone and scorched timber into pale dunes beneath a sky the color of tempered steel. Dawn had broken hours ago, yet no warmth seeped through the cloud-heavy firmament. Instead, the dim light only revealed the carnage more plainly. Crows hopped along ramparts slick with frozen blood, cawing as though disputing which red-soaked corpse belonged to whom. In the godswood, the air stank of sap and soot, and the great weirwood's mouth gaped crimson where dozens of arrows had lodged, then burned, then fallen away. Somewhere beyond the broken walls a horse screamed, one last breath torn from a punctured lung, and then there was silence again, thick as grave soil. Arya Stark stood at the threshold of the crypt passage, a scrap of blackened leather clutched in her trembling fist. She scarcely noticed the imprint of her own nails digging half-moons into her palm. Pain had become distant, unreal, like a childhood memory half-remembered. Every breath rasped fire across her ribs. Her hair, matted with ash and sweat, clung to her neck where a white's chipped fingernail had grazed her. Yet none of it mattered, not the cut on her temple, nor the bruises blossoming beneath her jerkin, because the Night King was gone. She had felt him vanish as keenly as sunrise burning away the last shadows of night. When Valyrian steel met ancient flesh outside the lone heart tree, the cold had shattered within her like glass, and with it, the army of the dead had fallen. Arya still saw the blue flame in his eyes guttering out, reflected in the mirrored surface of her blade as she drove it home. And as his essence dissolved into the frigid dark, something else had stirred at the far edge of her senses. A ripple, faint yet unmistakable, like a tide reversing direction in an instant. But the battle left no time to wonder. Her lungs were too busy hunting breath, her heart too busy hammering blood through numb limbs. Only when the last corpse had stopped twitching did unease unfurl inside her, quiet as frost on cold steel. Now she descended the stone steps in silence, torchlight dancing across carved faces of long-dead Starks. She almost expected Father's statue to speak, to ask what kept her from joining the living upstairs. The crypt air was warmer than the courtyards above, stale, but spared the wind's bite. Yet as Arya reached the bottom, the sound of muffled sobbing tugged her forward. Sansa knelt beside Maester Wolkan, pressing linens against a wounded woman's thigh. Blood soaked through finger-width strips of cloth. The iron tang thickened the air. To their left, Gilly rocked little Sam, eyes glazed with exhaustion. The torches guttered, painting faces amber. Shadow. Amber again. Sansa looked up when Arya approached, relief softening her taut features. "They're gone. All of them," Arya answered, voice rough. She glanced at the wounded, Sir Alyscar Stark, pale as milk glass, and back at her sister. "We'll need more bandages, clean water, what's left of it." Sansa nodded but touched Arya's wrist before she turned. "Have you seen Bran?" A prickle traveled down Arya's spine. "He was with Theon, in the Godswood." "I know," Sansa murmured. But when the whites fell, Bran's eyes, they were still white. "He hasn't woken, Arya. Theon's dead, the guards are dead, and Bran just sits in the snow, breathing but distant." "Mess." Arya swallowed. "I'll fetch him. Take someone with you." She shook her head. "I move faster alone." In truth, she feared what others might see. Some dread, nameless and cold, had settled behind her ribs. She tried to root it out by sheer will, as she had done with fear 100 times, but it lingered, an ice sliver lodged too deep to touch. The courtyard outside the crypt was a mosaic of broken bodies encased in rime. Fires crackled along shattered parapets. Men and women wandered among their dead, searching for kin, murmuring prayers to absent gods. Arya crossed the yard unseen, her steps light upon frost-slick stone, as though the wind itself guided her. The Godswood gate sagged, hinges buckled, a relic of last night's siege. Beyond, the sacred grove lay hushed. Branches bowed beneath snow's dead weight. Footprints crisscrossed the white carpet. Men, whites, wolves alike. At the heart tree, Arya found a ring of corpses, charcoal silhouettes contorted around a stiff boy in a wheeled chair. Bran wore his thick sable cloak, its hem sparkling with fresh snow. His eyes were closed, brows unknit, mouth parted as if whispering to some unseen companion. And yet, he breathed. Bran. Arya's voice shivered. She set needle's point to the snow, as one might ground a banner of truce. It's over. We're safe. The weirwood loomed behind him, blood-red leaves fluttering in a wind she did not feel. Heart sap streaked the trunk like tears newly shed. We're safe, she repeated, kneeling. Wake up. Bran's lids lifted. Pupils shrank, then widened, as though learning the shape of dawn all over again. But what froze Arya's breath was not the slow blink. It was the color. His irises were no longer brown. They blazed a pale, glacial blue. She heard a crunch behind her. Snow answered beneath a stranger's tread. Arya pivoted, hand on needle, but saw only the empty path winding back toward the gate. The hush returned, deeper than before. Bran's voice drifted over her shoulder, remote, absent of warmth. The long night is ended, he intoned, but shadows linger where light fears to tread. Bran. He regarded her without recognition. Names are waves upon a river. They break, renew, break again. An unbidden memory surged. Blue eyes peering from beneath a crown of shattered ice, lips curled in silent triumph. Arya had killed the Night King. She had watched him shatter like brittle crystal. Yet the presence before her felt older still, a coal of malice banked beneath centuries of snow. You're not my brother, she whispered. Bran smiled. Or rather, his mouth stretched into the suggestion of one, skin pulling where it had never practiced the gesture. I am the river. I am the tide. I am the moon that drags the sea. The wind rose among the branches, rattling crimson leaves like dry bones. Somewhere, a direwolf howled, long and mournful. Arya sheathed the needle with deliberate calm. Killing Bran, even if he was something else now, was unthinkable. She had killed the Night King, yes, but this was Hearthblood, the last son of Winterfell. And if the creature inside him retained even a gram of her brother, she could not chance piercing it. Come, she said quietly. The castle needs its lord. Bran tilted his head, curious. At length he extended a hand, fingers slack as puppet strings. Arya pushed the chair toward the gate, wheels crunching through snow. With each rotation she sensed the thing within him, studying Winterfell's broken walls, measuring distance and weakness, the way a huntsman gauges a wounded stag. And in the silence that followed them out of the Godswood, one truth lay heavier than any corpse. The war for the dawn had not ended. It had only shed one skin to don another. PGSQL. By twilight, whoever remained upright in the castle gathered in the great hall, though great was generous now. 2 support beams had been cracked by dragonfire. A fist-size hole in the roof let in flurries of snow that melted upon contact with the burning hearth. Benches were scavenged from the shattered stables. Torches burned low, their resinous smoke mingling with the stink of damp wool and charred flesh. Jon Snow stood at the head of the hall, ghost flanking him like a silent sentinel. Dark half-moons underlined Jon's eyes. His sword arm trembled when idle, a tremor he disguised by tightening and releasing his fist. The cost of victory weighed on him more than his fur-lined cloak. Yet when Arya arrived, pushing Bran's chair, relief cut through his exhaustion. Little sister, he murmured, pulling her into a rough embrace. She felt the jolt in his breath as he realized Bran's eyes burned blue. The hall's hush deepened. Even the crackle of the hearth seemed to falter. Sansa, seated nearest the hearth, rose like a stag at scent of wolves. Arya? Jon? What is this? I don't know, Arya replied. But we need Maester Walken. Someone fetch him. Bran's gaze swept the room. The ragged survivors, the wounded swaddled on pallets by the wall, the orphaned children clutching each other near the fire. His lips parted, as if breathing them all in. Kings, he murmured, voice barely audible. Queens. Pawns on a board carved from bone. Davos Seaworth stepped forward, jaw set. Lord Bran is cracked in the head. War does that. Let the maester bleed him. Give him milk of the poppy. No. The word sharpened from Bran's mouth like hoarfrost. Everyone stilled. The blue irises glittered, reflecting firelight in cold sparks. Your leechcraft will not unravel what binds me, Jon's fingers found Longclaw's pommel. "Who are you?" Bran turned to him. "The question is, who are you, Aegon of Fractured Thrones? Are you wolf, or dragon, or shadow fading in the dawn?" Jon flinched as though struck. Few yet knew of his Targaryen blood. Those who did exchanged wary glances. But Bran, whatever wore his flesh, spoke it before a hall of northerners already stretched thin by grief. Shouts rose, accusations ringing against stone. Arya's gaze darted, assessing distances, exits, weapons within reach. Ghosts snarled, ears flattening. Jon drew Longclaw half an inch. Sansa's voice cut through the uproar, calm, yet steely. "Enough." All eyes shifted. She stepped beside Bran's chair, chin high. "We are alive because we stood together last night. Sister slew the Night King. Dragonfire burned his legions. Brotherhood, birthright. None of it mattered in that hour, and none of it should matter tonight. Never amends?" She turned to Bran with quiet fury. "If our brother bears some torment of the mind, we will heal him. But you will sow no more discord inside these walls. Not while Winterfell stands." Bran's gaze lingered on her, peculiar, almost appreciative. "You speak with iron in your voice, Lady of Winterfell. You know who I am." "I know many things," Bran answered. "An echo of the boy who once climbed towers, mingled with something alien. I hear the ice cracking upon rivers far north of here. I taste the salt of sons that died 1,000 ages past. Names sift through me like ash on the wind. Yet I know you, Sansa." "Damn no." Sansa's throat bobbed. "Then know this. We will help you, but if you harm those under my protection, you will find the North unkind." Bran inclined his head. "Kindness is a river that freezes in winter." He closed his eyes, lashes pale against bluer veins. "We shall see what spring brings." The tension slackened a fraction. Arya exhaled, shoulders sagging. But inside her, the shard of dread twisted deeper. For she had seen captains parley before naval battles, smiling as they spun treachery behind calm masks. Bran's calm did not soothe. It provoked, like the pause in a storm when the air grows ominously still. PGSQL. That night, Arya watched over Bran's chamber from the narrow window seat outside, cross-legged, needle across her lap. Past curfew torches, the corridor was a throat of shadows. Footfalls echoed like distant drums when the last patrol passed. Inside, Bran slept. Or pretended to. Eyes shut, lips parted. Ghosts sprawled at the hearth opposite. Red eyes half-lidded, but alert. Arya's mind roiled. She turned the memory of those blue irises over and over, the way a jeweler inspects a cracked gem, seeking weakness. Could the Night King's power survive death? Skin changers could wear beasts. Could others wear men? The old tales said nothing of it, yet the old tales never spoke of a girl killing death itself. She thought of old Nan's stories of the first long night. Some versions claimed there had been a great sorcerer among the first men who betrayed his kin, throwing open the gates to the others in exchange for immortality. His name had long ago eroded from memory, but in whispers, he was called the Frostheart. What if such a spirit had lingered, drifting from host to host, waiting for a vessel soft enough to bend? Was Bran that vessel, open doorways of mind left unbarred by his green sight? A soft scrape jolted her. Bran had turned his head toward the window. His lids remained closed, yet he spoke, voice no louder than a falling feather. "Little cat of silent steps." Arya did not move. "You should rest." "Rest." The lips twitched. "There is no rest, only eddies where the current slows." "Do you fear me?" "Nam. I fear what I don't understand." It was half-truth. She feared what might threaten those she loved, and this thing smelled of danger. "Explain yourself." "Explanation will not change the song's melody. But you wish a verse." The blue eyes opened, fixed upon the ceiling. "The Night King's flesh perished by your hand. His will did not. The storm is a choir of many voices. One voice falls silent, the harmony persists. I and chord in dissonance together. Are you him? I am what remains after fire and steel peeled flesh from spirit. I am what he carried, and what carried him. Your brother's mind is expansive. It welcomed me, not unwillingly. Yeah. A chill seized her veins. He let you in. He saw all rivers, all tides, all winds the moment he touched the roots beneath that tree. He knew the shape of every possible tomorrow. He chose this. Why? To mend the wheel that grinds the world to dust. Ice and fire spin it alike. Your brother would break it, as others swore but failed. He surrenders his name that the world might live. Bran's breath fogged in the cool air, the only sign he still possessed lungs of flesh. I am instrument, he is conductor. Arya swallowed the iron rising in her throat. If you hurt him, hurt is human arithmetic. Bran is beyond such sums. Yet in time this body will falter, and I will drift again. Another host, another season. Unless the river is frozen at its source. How? Bran? Or the thing wearing him, smiled with one side of his mouth. You already know. Valyrian steel. Dragonfire. Dawn forged in heart's blood. But would you slay your brother again and again every time I pass into him? And what of the next host? The babe swaddled 2 rooms down. The sailor in White Harbor? The queen beyond the narrow sea. Will you cut the world into ribbons hunting me? Mimanoan. Wind keened outside the shutters, carrying with it a faint echo of winter's mournful dirge. Arya tightened her grip on Needle until her knuckles blanched. I'll kill you, she said softly. Even if it costs me the world. Such fury, the voice murmured. Steel heir to Lyanna's ghost. When love counts the cost, will fury pay the debt? He closed his eyes again, and the chamber's hush thickened. Arya sat immobile, as dawn crept pale and thin through ragged curtains. PGSQL. Morning found the castle an uneasy hive. News of Bran's blue eyes traveled faster than rats. Some whispered that the dead prince forged a white. Others said the Night King's ghost had flown into him like a cold wind. Still others insisted it was shock, nothing more. Tormund laughed at fear's shadow, while Gendry sharpened blades until sparks flew and words died on his tongue. Jon convened a council in the broken solar. Snow drifted through the hole where a stone had punched the roof. Tyrion Lannister balanced on a 3-legged stool, studying Bran as if he were a riddle with too many answers. Samwell Tarly rubbed red-rimmed eyes, his open tome speckled with ash. From the Vale arrived Robin Arryn, pale but eager to discuss alliances. From the south rode a weary host of 300 spear, led by Sir Davos' nephew, Mathis. Messengers blinked at Bran's unnatural gaze, then stumbled through oaths half-remembered. We cannot parade him before the lords, Sansa argued under her breath. Yet we cannot hide him like some deformed heir. He is Lord of Winterfell, Jon answered, though the words tasted ash. He saved us once and might again. Bran, seated by the frost-veiled window, traced invisible sigils in the air. Winterfell needs a keeper of names, he said. Let Sansa rule. I shall watch the rivers. Sansa met Jon's gaze, alarm warring with resolve. And if you watch ourselves to death? Then death will find shepherds of its own. Bran's blue irises flicked to Sam's open book. Legends of the Long Night. Burn that one. Ink may trap lies like flies in amber. Sam startled, hugging the tome. What lies? All of them, Bran replied. History is a quilt, sewn by the victors. Unpick a square and find blood. Tyrion considered him. Would you have us burn every library? Bran's gaze fixed on the dwarf's mismatched eyes, and for a heartbeat something hot, almost molten, glimmered behind the blue. Not every, he said, voice lowering. Just the ones that remember. Chill swept the room. Tyrion swallowed. Jon stepped in. Bran, or whoever you are, tell us what you intend. Bran's pupils narrowed to pinpricks. The north rots, the south festers. Dragons crack the sky, and lions prowl the ruins. I will mend the marrow of the world, but marrow cannot grow where rot is not cut away. Speak plainly, Sansa demanded. The realm is a corpse refusing to lie still. Bran's fingers closed into talons. I will still it. Silence expanded, bloated, and foul. Snow sifted through the roof hole, settling on maps spread across the table. Maps inked with lines of march and columns of supply. Each flake melted, darkening parchment into bruised smears. He means to wipe the slate, Tyrion murmured. Winter eternal, under a kinder night. Kinder, Davos scoffed. Bran stood. Or rather, the thing inside him pushed to rise. Joints creaking. Arya caught the chair before it toppled. Jon moved nearer, hand on hilt. Bran paid none of them heed. His gaze drifted toward the southern horizon visible through the broken wall. Clouds gather over King's Landing. Smoke chokes Meereen. South runs gorge on grain stolen from dead hands. But famine will come on quiet feet. Plague will ride their trade roads. The true long night lay not behind us. It marches now, clad in silks and sigils, bearing crowns of rot. Mantior. Sam cleared his throat with difficulty. You would hasten these calamities? I will let them run their course, Bran answered, serene. The world is diseased. Fever burns impurity. After, green shoots will drink the ash. Arya's heart pounded. And who lives to plant them? Those strong enough to bend yet not break, he said, eyes finding hers again. Perhaps you, little wolf. Perhaps none. Jon's temper flared. Will not allow you to gamble with lives like coins. Bran blinked, expression drifting somewhere between sorrow and amusement. What is allowance to the tide? In that instant, Arya's dread found shape. Bran stood at the mouth of a floodgate, and the realm was a valley below. Unless they sealed the gate, torrents would sweep south, freezing fields, drowning cities. Yet Bran's body was the gate. To shut it meant steel, or dragonfire. She felt Jon reach the same conclusion. It shadowed his jaw, tightened his throat. But how to tell the North they must kill the crippled boylord who saved them? And worse, what if the entity shifted hosts before the blade struck true? Arya thought of faceless whispers in Bravos, of poisons tasteless as snowflakes. But would poison fell a spirit? She had no illusions about her talents. She killed men, not ghosts. Yet she remembered the dagger, Valyrian steel, in her belt. It had ended one incarnation. Perhaps it might cage another, if driven through the right heart, beneath a weirwood's gaze. But to strike Bran now, before all these eyes, not yet. She would have one chance, no more. Bran's gaze slid away from them all, far away. It begins, he whispered. Kings clash in the south. Queens plot across the sea. The wolf howls at the dragon, and the lion gnaws its own tail. Let the wheel turn. Outside the broken wall, clouds gathered, a bruised bruise on the pale sky. Arya tasted snow on the wind, yet there lingered another scent beneath. Wet earth, ripe for decay. The council dissolved in murmurs. Half-hearted vows, new fears. Jon pulled Arya aside near the doorway where fallen masonry made a half-shelter against prying ears. Tell me you have a plan, he said. I have a dagger. He's our brother. He was, she corrected. Now he's a siege tower wearing Bran's skin. If we hesitate, we lose the castle and the realm. Jon's eyes glimmered wet. We'll find another way. Arya squeezed his hand. Maybe you will. But be ready if you don't. Turning, she slipped into the corridor. Footsteps feather light, as silent as the faceless men who taught her. The halls of Winterfell twisted around her like entrails. Somewhere deep within, Bran's laughter echoed. Not aloud, but in her mind, brittle ice cracking across a pond. And the river that was not Bran flowed on. PGSQL. South of Winterfell, in a valley flanked by jagged-toothed ridges, the dead thawed. Corpses of men who fell in the snow last night twitched, eyes opening to skies they had never seen. Ice crystals melted in sockets, dribbling down cheeks like tears. Fingers clenched. Limbs shuddered. No horn sounded. No master beckoned. Yet, as if guided by a memory etched into marrow, they turned north, toward the walls of Winterfell. Each step, left muddy prints in slush. Ravens tracked overhead, cawing warnings none would comprehend. At their head walked Theon Greyjoy. An arrow protruded from his breast. Blood-black ice crusted the wound. His eyes, too, glowed the color of Bran's. The river sought its tributary. PGSQL. That night, Arya crept along Merlons she once knew by heart. The courtyard below dotted with lantern fire where men hauled timber to rebuild the shattered gate. Ghosts prowled the shadows near the Great Hall. Jon lingered atop the battlement opposite, scanning the dark for movement. He would watch Bran. He had undertaken that vigil himself, refusing to sleep. Arya's breath plumed silver. Somewhere beneath her cloak lay the dagger, heavy with grim promise. A shout rose from the western wall. Torches bobbed. Horns split the night. One, then two, barely a heartbeat apart. The cry spread along the battlements as vibrations in stone. Whites! Arya's heart lurched. Impossible. They had fallen. But the shouts grew, frantic, drawing her gaze toward the black line of trees beyond the field. Shapes detached, shambling forms limned by torchlight. She sprinted down the stairs 3 at a time, vaulting a broken parapet. Men fired flaming arrows, their last supply, into the horde, and for a breath, Arya thought it might break them. Instead, charred flesh sloughed off, revealing fresh sinew beneath. These dead were not held by brittle ice. Some other power threaded their limbs. She reached the inner yard as the first corpse clambered the rubble mound and leapt. Its eyes shone blue. Not any blue, Bran's blue, deep and fathomless. Arya slammed needle through its throat, pivoted, slashed the tendons behind one knee. The corpse collapsed, but its arms kept clawing until Jon severed its spine with Longclaw's Valyrian edge. And still the torso writhed until Ghost tore its head free. What sorcery is this? Jon cursed, breath pluming. Arya's voice rasped. The same as Bran's. Across the yard, more undead spilled over crumbled walls. But these fought with cunning. Circling, fainting, ripping torches from hands to snuff flame and snow. They moved like puppets danced by a single ruthless puppeteer. Jon's gaze flew toward the great hall where Bran slept. He's calling them. Lightning forked the sky, illuminating the courtyard in stark white. For a heartbeat, Arya saw the oncoming tide. Dozens? No, hundreds of corpses, once northern men now stitched together by malign will. And marching at their center, arrow still protruding, was Theon. Summer's memory fled her veins. She turned to Jon. Keep them back. I'll end this. Jon caught her arm. Wait. There's no time. She slipped free, darting toward the godswood. Behind, the gate groaned, splintering under weight of undead flesh. Steel clanged. Ghosts howl keened above battle din. Arya flew across snow-slick boards, breath ragged. The godswood loomed like the mouth of night. She plunged under crimson leaves, boots skidding, vision tunneling toward the heart tree. Bran sat beneath it, eyes open, fixed upon some northern horizon. The weirwood's gouged face wept frozen sap down onto his shoulders like a priest anointing a penitent. Stop, Arya demanded, voice cracking. She brandished the dagger, metal black against snow. Call them off. Bran's eyes shifted to her. You misunderstand the river. It does not stop for stones. Then I'll damn it. She sprang. Bran did not flinch, but the roots beneath him surged, gnarled arms of living wood. One entwined her ankle, wrenching midair. She rolled, slicing the root before it crushed bone. More rose, grappling. She slashed and twisted, heart drumming, but the wood sprouted faster than mortal saplings ever could. The tree remembers, Bran intoned. His pupils dilated until the blue was rimmed almost black. It remembers what men forget. Arya hurled a knife her free hand had drawn, one of many stashed along her belt. It struck Bran's arm, burying to the hilt. His breath caught, yet no blood seeped, only pale, steaming vapor. He grasped the blade's hilt and withdrew it with measured calm. Frost encrusted the steel. Roots closed around Arya's wrists, pinning them to snow. Cold numbed her skin. She felt her pulse slow. Above, the tree's limbs creaked. red leaves whispering warnings older than tongues. Bran leaned forward in his chair, or was thrust by unseen will, eyes narrowing. Child of night and blood, the face is not the only mask. You could wear mine, if you dare. Arya gritted her teeth, straining against bonds. I want my brother back. He is here. He is everywhere. Bran's hand, unnaturally steady, pressed upon her forehead. Cold seeped through layers of leather, skin, bone, worming into marrow. In her mind's eye she saw frozen rivers, black-eyed moons, a white stag consumed by wolves, a copper corridor of memory twisting to infinity. She teetered on the brink of something vast, terrifying, seductive. In that yawning abyss, she found Bran's voice, distant yet familiar, calling her name across storm-torn skies. She reached, fingers of thought brushing his, and watched as shadow flooded between them, severing the bond. The dagger in her belt pulsed heat against her hip. Desperation fired her veins. She wrenched one wrist free, ignoring tendons tearing. With a surge, she drew the dagger and drove it toward Bran's heart. Wood lashed, but she twisted, letting the root take the blade side instead of her own. Steel sliced bark. Sap hissed. She pivoted, using the recoil to hurl herself sideways, rolling free of the remaining root's grasp. Snow bit into her cheek as she skidded. The dagger flew from her grasp, landing meters away near the pool where the heart tree's reflection quivered. Bran watched her tumble, expression inscrutable. Even rivers changed course. Arya spat blood, heart hammering. She lunged for the dagger, but Bran's gaze snapped to it. Ice bloomed across the ground, racing like cracks in tempered glass. The blade became entombed in a sheet of crystal moments before her fingers closed. She hammered the ice with hilt of needle. Fractures spider-webbed but held. Branches above groaned. She glanced up, saw Theon's corpse climbing the trunk, arrow still embedded, eyes ice-bright. His dead lips spread in a rictus grin. No, she breathed. Theon leapt. Pile. She dodged, rolling as his weight crunched snow. Valyrian dagger still trapped, Arya drew needle. Yet fighting a dead man while Bran commanded the wood itself would end one way. She pivoted and fled, toward the rim of the pool. Splashing through shallow water, she willed her feet to fly over slick roots. Theon followed, unheeding of frost-slick stones. The godswood rang with the clash of steel on scabbard. Arya feinted left and ducked under a low bough. Theon crashed through branches behind her, grabbing her cloak. She shrugged free, twisting. Needles slashed his cheek, carving black ice. He snarled, backhand catching her ribs. Air fled her lungs, but she used the momentum, falling, rolling, snatching a handful of gravel. She flung it into his eyes, shards sticking like glass. As he reeled, she vaulted onto his back, burying needle through the base of his skull. The dead man collapsed. Yet she sensed no release, no dissolution as when Whites died. Rather, a fragment of cold leapt from Theon and whispered away like smoke, toward Bran. And Bran opened his mouth to inhale the fragment. Fury ignited Arya's blood. She seized Needle's hilt again, sprinted for the frozen dagger. Dropping to knees, she slammed boots, fist, pommel upon the ice until cracks split beneath her. With a cry, she drove Needle's crossguard as wedge. The sheet shattered. She snatched the dagger free, icicles slicing her palm. Bran watched, unblinking. Roots writhed sluggishly, drained from exertion. The wind hissed whispers through red leaves. Arya rose, panting. Let him go. Bran's voice softened, almost kind. Little cat, always chasing mice in walls. What if the mouse is the wall? What if the wall is the world? Then I'll break the world, she said. She charged, dagger raised. Bran lifted a hand and the air between them thickened, cold so absolute it scorched. Frost cascaded from her hair as she pushed through. The heart tree's face loomed beside, mouth carved in eternal agony. At the last instant, Bran's eyes flickered, blue fracturing with threads of brown. His lips parted. Arya, he breathed. Bran's voice this time, cracking with fear. Don't. She hesitated, heartbeat suspended. The blue surged back, drowning Bran. She drove the dagger home. Steel pierced leather. Then flesh. Then something else. Ice. Glass. Time itself. Bran gasped, colorless vapor pluming from his lips. The tree behind him howled. Sap spurted red on snow. For a heartbeat, all sound fled. No wind, no crackling roots, no hammering of Arya's pulse. Then a roar like glaciers calving shattered the silence. Light burst from Bran's chest, where steel erupted in white-blue flame. Arya ripped the blade free. Bran arched, mouth agape in silent scream. The flame twined up the weirwood, igniting leaves that did not burn but glowed from within. Veins pulsing. The roots writhed, thrashing. Arya stumbled back, shielding her eyes. In the glare she saw Bran's form fracturing, splinters of frost spinning away, each wisp etched with fleeting faces. The Night King, a pale sorcerer, 1,000 blue-eyed children. They ascended in a spiral toward the bleeding sky, dissolving into sparks. As the last ember faded, Bran collapsed, lifeless. The weirwood's leaves dimmed, crimson darkened to rust. In the distance, horns sounded. Cheers, disbelief. The undead tide had stilled. Arya knelt beside her brother's body, pulling him into her lap. His eyes, brown once more, stared sightless, but peaceful. She pressed her forehead to his, tears carving warm paths down soot-smeared cheeks. Footsteps crunched behind her. Jon arrived, snow-caked, sword dripping black blood. He saw Bran, saw Arya's tear-streaked face, and his knees buckled. Ghost whined, burying muzzle in Bran's motionless hand. "He asked me not to let the dawn die," Arya whispered. "I think this is what he meant." Jon could not speak. He gathered them both in his arms. The three of them huddled beneath the scarred heart tree, while dawn cast hesitant light across Winterfell's ruined walls. Yet as the sun climbed, Arya felt no triumph, only emptiness yawning wide. She had slain death twice, but each victory cost a piece of her heart, and she sensed the realm would bleed still, for rot lingered in wounds unseen. But for this moment, brother and sister and wolf shared a silence unmarred by ice or shadow, and the river of night at last ran thin. Far to the south, across fields scorched by dragonfire and seas churned by tempest, kings and queens stirred in waking nightmares they could not name, shivering at a cold prick upon their spines, unaware the ice that haunted them had bled out beneath a crimson tree, far beyond their sight, and somewhere deeper still, beneath roots reaching older than race or realm. A faint echo lingered, like frost cracking on still water, promising it was not the end. PGSQL. Smoke from the funeral pyres drifted above Winterfell for 3 days, weaving gray veils that blurred the boundary between sky and ruin. Ravens circled in slow spirals, their caws swallowed by the hush that settles when grief exhausts even tears. No horns sounded, no banners fluttered, and every clang of hammer on nail was muffled, as if the very air conspired to mask the living from the dead, still watching. At dawn, on the 4th day, Jon Snow carried Bran's body from the silent chambers beside the old library, his cheeks hollow with sleeplessness, his eyes rimmed dark. Arya walked before him bearing the shattered haft of Bran's carved weirwood chair, its grain stained by sap and blood alike. Sansa followed, pale and unadorned, fingers squeezing a single iron key, the key to the crypts, until impressions bruised her skin. No Septon led the procession, for none had survived the night of ice, and the old gods needed no words. They bore their brother to the godswood one last time. There, under the scarred heart tree, they placed him upon a bier of rowan and pine. Davos laid a pale cloak across Bran's chest. Samwell murmured a passage from an Andal text that spoke of rivers returning to the sea. Snow sifted from a cloudless sky, melting on Bran's lashes like transient tears. Arya touched his brow. In the stillness she felt no echo, no stirring of forgotten frost. Only the chill of winter's breath remained. She kissed his forehead, tasting salt and ash, then turned away, unable to watch the flames begin. Jon struck steel to flint. Sparks leaped, caught in the oil-soaked kindling, and soon orange tongues lapped at crimson leaves overhead. The heart tree did not burn. The weirwood's bark seemed to repel flame, but firelight flickered across its face, giving the carved eyes an illusion of grief. Smoke wafted heavenward, and with it rose the last of their brother, twining through branches until dawn winds carried him beyond sight. All day the pyres crackled. For Bran, for Theon, for the nameless fallen who had risen again only to be felled once more. By dusk, snow hid the ashes, and the living turned to the work of surviving. PGSQL. Reconstruction was slow and silent. Burned beams had to be cut away. Shattered stone pried loose before new blocks could be set. The smithies rang once more, but each hammer blow sounded tentative, as if every anvil were a tombstone. Rations were inventoried. By count of Gilly and the scribes, less than a month of grain remained for Winterfell's swollen population. Carts rumbled to the south road, searching hamlets for supplies or succor. Most returned empty. The fields had died under blizzard and battle alike. Yet it was not famine that pressed like a knife edge to Arya's throat. It was rumor. Lantern talk and sculleries claimed Arya Stark had murdered her brother to steal his mantle. Sansa's council refuted every whisper, but poison dripped from lip to ear all the same. A day after the funeral, 2 guards were discovered strangled in a storeroom, blue glass beads placed upon their tongues. The meaning was clear to Arya. Someone mourned the lost river and dreamed of its return. She began to haunt the corridors by night, as in her girlhood. Silent as breath, she slipped through arrow slits and forgotten sally ports, mapping every shadow. She found no conjurers of frost, only desperate men trading knives for bread. Only maids weeping over pyres gone cold. Yet each dawn she felt watched by eyes that were not eyes. A prickle at the back of her neck like a cobweb's kiss. On the 6th day, Jon summoned her to the broken solar. Sam, Davos, and Tyrion waited around a table where the old map had been brushed, mostly free of soot. Candles guttered in the draft, bleeding through the cracked roof. Jon spoke first, his voice hoarse. Doubts from White Harbor returned an hour past. Wyman Manderley sends word. Plague has struck the port. Fever, coughing blood. Half his healers dead. Neo. He begs aid? Davos asked. He begs us to bar the roads, Jon answered. To spare the rest of the north. Sam's fingers trembled on the parchment. The Citadel wrote of similar signs in old Valyria after the doom. A sickness that spread like wildfire, as though the very air carried death. Tyrion's brows knit. Coincidence? Or the rot Bran predicted? Arya paced, both heels scuffing debris. He spoke of famine, plague, and queens across the sea. Some of it may unfold regardless of sorcery. War breeds illness. A convenient prophecy, Tyrion mused. Foretell every calamity and claim credit when any occur. He was no charlatan. Jon insisted, though despair tinged his words. We all saw what he wrought. Davos exhaled through his beard. Whether magic or chance, we cannot wall Winterfell off like a tomb. Southrons will send envoys, seeking aid or refuge, if plague rides with them. We have no choice, Arya cut in. We fortify. Seal the castle proper, keep out strays and pray spring answers. Tyrion pointed to the map. We also send ravens. The Vale, River Run, even the twins. Share what we know. Let them build fires at their gates. Perhaps quarantine buys time. Matter. Sam swallowed. There's another matter. The Maester's ravens say Daenerys Targaryen marches north from King's Landing with what hosts remain, unsullied Dothraki and 2 dragons. She means to honor the pact struck against the dead. She doesn't yet know Bran is gone. No one spoke for a long moment. Snow hissed through the roof hole onto the map, melting over the painted neck. Finally Jon rasped. How many days? 10, perhaps less. Sam's eyes flicked to Arya. She travels fast in winter skies. Jon's shoulders sagged. We must prepare. Tyrion rubbed his nose. She will expect homage from the north. She may accept Bran's death, or see it as treachery. Arya felt a migraine pulse behind her eyes. If she thinks us traitors, she'll burn this castle from the sky. Davos nodded grimly. Seen that glare in her eyes once before. When a dragon queen feels wronged, towns char like driftwood. Jon closed his fist on the map. I will parley with her first, alone if need be. You think she'll listen? Tyrion asked softly. Jon's reply was barely a whisper. She loves me. A pause. Or did. Silence claimed them again. Heavy as new stones on Bran's cairn. PGSQL. That evening, Arya descended to the crypts, key in hand. Torchlight bobbed ahead, accompanied by soft footfalls. She frowned. Few dared roam here without summons. Rounding a bend, she found Sansa leaning over Lyanna Stark's statue, fingers tracing the stone roses. You never visit alone, Arya said, voice echoing among pillars. Sansa started, but composed herself. I could not sleep. I thought to speak to Mother. Nain. What did she say? That I carry too many burdens. A sad curve touched Sansa's lips. She always asked me to stand tall. I find standing harder than I imagined. Arya approached, torch casting long shadows across effigies. You carry Winterfell now. Jon has. Other fires to douse. Sansa nodded. And you carry his sword in the dark. Arya shrugged. If I can slice rumors as neatly as throats, perhaps we'll live the winter. Sansa's gaze lingered on Lyanna's face. Soul like Arya's own, forever 19 and defiant. Did Bran know? She whispered. When he let that thing inside. Did he foresee his end? Arya hesitated. In dreams since the funeral she had heard Bran's voice by riverbanks of mist, warning her not to harden beyond forgiveness. But waking words were elusive. He knew more than he said. Enough to choose ruin for himself, perhaps, if it spared us greater ruin. Sansa's throat tightened. Then we owe him peace. Peace demands vigilance, Arya replied. Something stirs still. The dead we burned should not have risen after their master fell. Someone else touched that power. Nah. Could it be Daenerys? Sansa asked, but doubt laced her tone. Dragons are heat, not frost, Arya said. Yet, if fire can birth shadow, as at Stannis' camp, perhaps ice may breed its own flickers. I don't know. Sansa offered the torch. Then keep watch, sister. I must ready our court for a queen. Arya took it. They walked together to the stair, then parted. Sansa ascending toward flickering banners, Arya descending further into gloom. At the crypt's deepest level, moisture beaded stone. Cobwebs fluttered like drowned veils. Arya paused before Ned Stark's effigy, remembering the warm, calloused hand that once guided her grip on needle. She whispered of Bran's passing, of rumors sharpening like knives, of dragons on the march. The stone offered no counsel. As she turned to leave, a soft sound brushed her ear, like distant hooves on snow. She froze, torch shearing black shapes across walls. Silence resumed. But then came a whisper, faint yet distinct, from somewhere beyond the sealed passages. A boy's voice, tired, carrying a single word. Arya. She pivoted, sweeping the flame. Nothing moved. Again. Arya. It faded, stolen by damp walls, but recognition trembled in her chest. Bran. Impossible, yet, like wind through reeds, that echo had his cadence. Half dream, half memory. She advanced toward a blank section of wall. Here, the family catacombs ended. Behind lay earth unmapped, yet the voice had come from beyond stone. She pressed her palm to the cold rock. Show me, she whispered. 3 heartbeats later, a draft kissed her fingertips. From a seam she had never noticed, a hairline crack ran vertical, masked by lichen. She wedged her dagger, pried. Stone grated. A narrow gap widened, exhaling stale air. Torch raised, Arya slipped through. A cramped corridor descended, roughly hewn, older than the crypt itself. Steps spiraled, then leveled into a cavern where a thin rivulet trickled along the floor, gleaming red in torchlight. Iron in water or something foul. The path widened into a natural chamber. At its center lay a pool ringed by stalagmites. On the far side, carved into rock, crouched what looked like a small weirwood face, mouth open, tongue hollow, as if drinking the dark water. But the wood was wrong. Not white and pulsing, but petrified gray. Its eyes were empty sockets. Something glimmered on the pool's edge, a shard of ice no longer than her thumb, glowing faint cerulean. Arya knelt, pulse roaring, and reached. Cold stung her skin, not numbing, but alive, prickling with static. As fingers closed upon the shard, she saw, reflected in its facets, fragments of memory. Bran's face splintering into blue. Theon's dead grin, rivers freezing mid-flow. And deeper still, another image. A hooded figure beside a black stone altar, holding out a wooden bowl while a blue flame burned within. She pulled back. The shard dimmed, but did not release its chill. In its depths, a single breath of light pulsed, like a heart. The whisper came again, this time from the shard itself. River. Not. Ended. Heart-pounding, Arya pocketed the fragment in a leather pouch, dousing torch in water to hide her track. Darkness claimed the chamber as she retraced steps to the crypt. Behind her, the unseen face in the wall seemed almost to smile. PGSQL. Snow buried the King's Road in waist-high drifts, yet south of Moat Caelan Daenerys Targaryen's host pressed on. Unsullied spear points glimmered beneath pale sun. Dothraki Aurochs rested across saddles behind thick firs. Grey Worm rode at the van, impassive, scanning frozen ridges for ambush. Above, Drogon traced slow arcs, black wings tattered at tips where scorpion bolts had once gouged. Rhaegal flew lower, green scales dull beneath frost, but his yellow eyes burned bright. 2 miles ahead, scouting outriders reined in at a crossroads inn burnt to its sills. Fresh smoke drifted from the wreck. One rider dismounted, lifting a charred plank. Upon it, written in coal, was a single sentence in the common tongue. "Fever walks this way." They rode back, snow spraying. Daenerys listened, face inscrutable. Missandei, wrapped in a sable cloak, translated for Khal Hanno and the Blood Riders. Murmurs rippled through the horde. Some Dothraki believed plague a curse of cold witches. Unsullied feared no sickness but worried for their queen. Daenerys turned to Jorah Mormont, now gaunt yet steady in his saddle. "If Winterfell is stricken, our arrival may spread contagion between hosts. We must know truth before marching my people into death." Jorah nodded. "Send a smaller party ahead. I'll ride." "No." She lifted gloved fingers to stave off argument. "You are my sword. I need you by my side. I will fly." She strode to Drogon, scales glittering with hoarfrost. Ser Varys, wrapped like a silkworm in furs, protested. "Your grace, these northern winds cannot stop dragonfire," she said, vaulting onto the saddle. "I swore to shield the realm of men. I will not cower from wind or plague." "Nan." Drogon leapt, beating torrents of snow from earth. Rhaegal followed at Rhaenys' command. Jon's young cousin, dark of eye and fierce of will, chosen to ride when Jon refused. 2 dragons banked north, leaving the host like ants upon white cloth. From a ridge far behind, a lone watcher observed through a brass eyeglass. Under layers of fur, the watcher's eyes flickered pale blue as frost. When the dragons vanished into cloud, the watcher folded the glass, mounted a shaggy courser, and rode west toward Flint's Finger. PGSQSQ. In Winterfell's yard, Jon drilled raw recruits, boys too young for beards, girls who had never hefted spear. Each clumsy lunge, each slip on ice, felt a mockery of the instructors at Castle Black. Yet he persisted. Better bruises now than graves tomorrow. Ghost limped among them, one hind leg bound where a half-burned wight had scored him. The direwolf snarled at careless footwork, until fear sharpened memory. By midday, a shout rose from the walls. A dragon's silhouette wheeled against flannel clouds. Recruits scattered, some crying warning, others awe. Jon sprinted up the stair. The beast descended slow. Snow swirled by downdrafts, until massive talons crunched onto the smashed outer yard. Drogon's head snaked forward, red eyes narrowing. Upon his neck, Daenerys sat, hair braided with silver rings. Jon stepped clear of the parapet. "My queen," he called, though few heard over the thunder of wings. He strode across churned snow, stopping beyond Whipping Tail's reach. Drogon exhaled steam thick as mists. Daenerys swung down, boots sinking in drift. Her cloak billowed like shadow flame. She surveyed the ruined walls, the burned gatehouse, the scant defenders lining the ramparts. Then her gaze fixed on Jon. For a heartbeat's softness glimmered, but it hardened like pond water in sudden frost. "You live," she said. "Thanks to many," he answered. "You came despite winter." "Despite betrayal, you mean?" Her eyes shone with unshed tears, voice ironclad. "I heard whispers on the road. Brandon Stark dead by his sister's hand. My ally slain under your watch." "He was." Jon glanced at clustered soldiers, at small folk peering from doorways. He lowered his voice. "We cannot speak here." She studied him, then nodded. "Then lead me to truth." Aegon Targaryen. The name cracked across the yard like a whip. Gasps rose. Some knelt, others merely stared. Mouths agape. Jon felt blood leave his face. Word spread faster than wildfire, and now his queen had poured oil on embers. He gestured toward the great hall. Arya appeared in the doorway, eyes narrow. Sansa emerged behind, posture rigid. Tyrion, having heard the commotion, limped from the wounded tower, ready to negotiate. Daenerys strode ahead, Drogon crouching at gate's shadow. Rhaegal landed atop a parapet with an avalanche of snow, roaring at crows that fled. Winterfell trembled beneath the weight of wings. PGSQL. Inside the hall, warmth lingered from fresh torches. Sansa's retinue stood like statues against cracked pillars. Arya took a corner near the hearth, hood shadowing her gaze. Jon and Daenerys faced each other before the high table where Bran's chair once sat empty. Tyrion cleared his throat. "Your Grace, news of Lord Bran's death comes as shock to all. Permit the Starks to explain." Daenerys held up a hand. "I will hear it from Jon." He inhaled. "Bran was possessed by the spirit that led the dead. He threatened all life. Arya slew him to save us." Convenient. Her chin lifted. "Slay the cripple who cannot speak. Label him monster, bury the truth." Arya spoke from the shadows. "I buried a dagger in his heart after he raised dead men against us." "We saw no dead," Grey Worm replied, his unswerving gaze fixed on Jon. "Because they fell again when Bran did," Arya said. "The ashes of their second death lie in the courtyard still." Daenerys' gaze skewered her. "You ask me to trust the girl who wears many faces. How do I know you did not simply tire of a brother's rule?" "Ben." Sansa stepped forward, fury simmering. "Careful, Your Grace. You stand beneath my roof." "Your roof stands because my dragons bled for it," Daenerys snapped. "Your brother guided Viserions' murder. Your sister took my hand hostage at Dragonstone. And now another brother lies dead. You threaten alliances with every breath." Jon raised palms. "Enough. We are allies still. We bled together at Winterfell. Please, walk with me to the Godswood. I will show you where Bran died, where the heart tree bleeds." "Mystero." She hesitated, eyes glinting suspicion and sorrow. At length she nodded. They crossed the yard, unsullied, forming cordon. Snow tamped beneath boots. The Godswood gate groaned as they entered. The heart tree loomed ahead, bark gouged where roots had torn free. At its base lay a mound of fresh-turned earth covered by white direwolf pelt, Bran's grave. A wide scar marred the ground where flame had scorched snow to glassy slag. Daenerys knelt, brushing fingers along frozen soil. The tree's face seemed to watch. She lifted a clod, sniffed. Ash and sap scents mingled acrid. "This wound, it feels wrong." "Because ice burned," Jon said. "Magic we don't understand." She touched the scarred bark. "But the tree lives." "Barely," Arya muttered behind. Daenerys stood, turning. In her eyes lay grief, but also calculation. Whether Bran was monster or martyr, he is gone. But the realm still needs a ruler. Sansa entered the grove. "We rule ourselves." "You would secede again?" Daenerys asked, incredulous. "No. When plague rises and Lannister remnants muster in the Reach, Tyrion arrived puffing, parchment in hand. I've ravens. Report of Euron Greyjoy's fleet off Fair Isle. Cersei's supporters rallying around an infant said to be her son. Storm brewing, your grace. Daenerys' jaw set. Good. Let the winds carry me to them. But the north will march beside. Jon's voice was low. We cannot march. Not while famine and fever creep up our skirts. She turned on him. You vowed me fealty. My dragon fire saved your world. Now I ask for your swords. Mine? And you shall have them. Once my people are safe. Your people. She stepped closer, breath plume merging with his. You are my people, Targaryen. I saved you from oath at the wall. Crowned you king in the north. Loved you even while you hid your name. Must I remind you what a dragon does to betrayal? Jon's hand rested on Longclaw's hilt. Not threatening, but grounding. I won't betray you, but I won't abandon them. You can burn Winterfell down to force obedience, but ashes will not follow banners. Now. Daenerys' eyes shimmered with conflict, love, anger, weariness. Then choose. The north, or me. Silence froze like snowflakes between them. The weirwood's leaves rustled. Jon's voice cracked. I chose you once, but you asked me to forsake them. I can't. His eyes brimmed. I'm sorry. A dragon's roar split the air, echoing across walls. Drogon's silhouette loomed beyond the gate, smoke curling from nostrils. Rhaegal answered aloft, wings buffeting frost-laden branches. Daenerys' breath shook. Then the dragon must show claws. She turned, cloak whipping. Grey worms signaled unsullied to formation. Arya tensed, fingers brushing dagger. Sansa slipped between spearmen and Jon, daring soldiers to skewer a Stark lady. Tyrion looked ready to faint. The standoff was shattered by a horn atop the walls. A scout bellowed, riders from the south. Banner of the Kraken. Arya's blood iced. Ironborn Dotwadi. Jon exploded into motion, striding past unsullied. Daenerys followed, frown carved in frost. They reached the battlements as a column emerged from drifting snow. 30 horse, half-armored, half-rag-clad. At their head rode a woman in black surcoat, a silver kraken sigil bright on her chest. Asha Greyjoy. She lifted her helm, displaying wind-blown hair and face set in grim urgency. Voice booming, she hailed. I bring word for Jon Snow and the Dragon Queen. Jon cupped hands. Speak. Asha's shout carried. Plague grips the coasts. My garrisons rot at their posts. But worse, ships under green flame sail from Old Town bearing priests of Era lore. They claim prophecy bids them burn the dead or the living alike. Town's bar doors, but fire leaps walls. They spread sickness and shadow. I barely escaped with these. Daus. Tyrion's face paled. Priests of the Red God unbound. Perfect conflagration. Daenerys leaned toward Jon. Fire now marches as plague. Or as cure, Tyrion muttered. Burn the sick to cleanse the realm. Old doctrine of the Red Temples. Asha continued. They sail north, following whispers of an ice shard that can kill a god. They seek it to cast into flame, to summon their Lightbringer reborn. Peace. Arya's hand flew to the pouch at her belt. Inside, the shard throbbed faint cold. Jon glanced to her, sensing shift. Arya shook her head imperceptibly. Not here. Daenerys called down. You fled them. Will you fight beside us? Asha spat into snow. Euron's fleet nears Deepwood Motte. I swore to break his neck. Stand with me, and the north may hold its shores. Jon looked at Daenerys. We can't fight plague and Ironborn both. We fight plague with fire, she answered, eyes gleaming. And Ironborn with dragons. You'll scorch the coast. Better coast than kingdom. Her words were steel. Arya stepped forward. Fire spreads plague faster. Wind carries cinders to fields. Daenerys spun on her silken fury. You trusted cold steel to save the realm. Trust fire now. Jon interposed. We must think. A shriek carved the sky. Rhaegal banked sharp above, wings faltering. A second shriek. Higher. Something streaked from cloud, an arrow trailing green fire. It struck Rhaegal's shoulder. Flames burst across scales. The dragon roared, spinning, black smoke spiraling from wound. Daenerys cried out, racing to Drogon. Grey Worm bellowed orders, unsullied stream to ballistae salvaged from the dead fleet. More fire-tipped bolts rained from hidden crevices in the curtain wall. Saboteurs within. One struck a hay cart. Green fire blossomed, roaring hotter than forge. Another bolt pierced a granary roof. Grain ignited like tinder. Chaos consumed the yard. Northern archers fell afoul of their own ramparts, where saboteurs lit oil casks. Ghost vanished into smoke. Red eyes blazing. Arya dived from parapet to scaffolding, racing toward a figure loosing fire arrows from a ruined tower. Black cloak, face obscured. She leapt, slamming him into wall. His hood slipped to reveal a blue glowing gaze. He snarled, inhuman, clawing at her throat. She buried dagger in his ribs. Blue light snuffed. The saboteur sagged, human again, eyes wide in death. Arya ripped pouch from his belt. Inside, a shard like hers, embedded in rotting flesh. The same cold pulse. She stared, mind racing. Below, Jon guided firefighting lines amid flaming grain. Daenerys mounted Drogon, crying for Rhaegal. The green-fired arrow had pierced deep. The wound flared sickly. Drogon roared, spraying black flame that consumed the tower from which Bolt had flown. Stone splintered. Smoke churned with snow. Arya sprinted downstairs, shards clinking. Reaching Jon, she thrust the pouch into his hand. They used the same ice, like seeds of possession. Bran's river flows still. Jon's eyes widened. Plant enough seeds, and the realm drowns. He looked to Daenerys circling above, to flames licking grain stores, to unsullied skewering saboteurs who bled frost. If these shards enslave men, the Red Priests might use them to forge terror. Fire and ice bound as weapon. Arya nodded. We must find the source, destroy it. Where did you get yours? She hesitated. The crypt. His brows knit. But battle raged. Keep them hidden. We'll talk after we save Winterfell again. They fought beside each other, dousing flames, slaying blue-eyed saboteurs. By dusk, smoke clung to keep walls as fog. Rhaegal landed near the Godswood, wound sizzling where Drogon's molten fire cauterized. He lived, barely. Daenerys walked from dragons, ash streaking her cheeks. She found Jon amid charred grain. Your castle burns from within like King's Landing once did. How long before its heart goes black? Jon, exhausted, stared at smoke. We fight shadow we don't understand. Then we purge shadow with light. Her gaze hardened. If you're North rebels, I will not spare it next time. She strode away before he could answer. PGSQL. That night, Arya met Jon Maester Walken's deserted library. Only a single candelabrum glowed amid rows of half-burnt scrolls. She laid 3 shards on the table, her own and 2 from saboteurs. Each pulsed faintly. Sam joined, face ashen. He set a Red Priest's parchment before them. Intercepted from Old Town Flotilla. He pointed to sigil, a many-rayed sun aflame. Followers of Benero. They preach union of fire and ice to forge a sword of mourning. They claimed the Lord of Light whispered shards of the Night King survived, hidden beneath roots of the world. Arya crossed arms. We found roots in the crypt, an ancient tunnel, older than Winterfell. There may be more. Jon asked, how do we destroy these shards? Sam shrugged. Valyrian blades shattered creatures from which they came. Perhaps reforge them in dragon fire? Nutdummer. Arya eyed the candle. Wax pooled, dimly reflecting blue glimmers. What if dragon fire strengthens them? Jon lifted Longclaw to table. Its dark steel drank candlelight, veins of rippled metal like frozen rivers. He placed a shard upon the flat blade. Blue light brightened, as though feeding on Valyrian aura. That answers, Arya muttered. We need something else. Sam ruffled scrolls. Legend speaks of Dawn Forge. White blade forged from heart of a falling star. Wielded by Sir Arthur Dane. Some said its light parted night. If shards are pure night, dawn might sunder them. Nettie Morks. John sighed. Dawn was lost at Tower of Joy. Not lost, Sam corrected. Returned to Starfall. Lady Nymeria Dane keeps it. Arya straightened. Starfall lies across plague-ridden southern sands. John looked north to Dark Window, and a dragon queen ready to raise non-believers. Roads fork, Arya whispered. Ice shards here, fire priests there, Ironborn at coast. We can't stand in every place. Sam met their eyes. Then, we divide. John must hold Winterfell, bargain with Daenerys. Arya, swift as shadow, ride south to Starfall. Find dawn, if it exists, and return to cut night's root. Dadin Messiah. John's jaw tightened. She rides alone? Arya shook her head. I ride with Gendry, and the Hound if he still curses the world. Few can outride him. John gripped her arm. If plague catches. I've danced with death, she said softly. One more reel. He exhaled, then slid Longclaw's scabbard across table. Take it. It's yours, she protested. Better mine than Bran's fate, he said. I'll use another. She clasped blade. Its weight reasserted purpose. I'll bring dawn back or not at all. They embraced, siblings bound by steel and sorrow. Behind them, shards pulsed, candle flame guttering blue. PGSQL. 2 nights later, a small party rode from the Hunter's Gate at moonrise. Arya on a sand-colored courser. Gendry atop a black mare. Sandor Clegane leading a pack mule laden with dried meat and dragonglass axes. Through swirling snow they slipped, unseen save by a lone figure atop a tower. Daenerys, cloak billowing. She watched them vanish beyond torch's reach, expression unreadable, then turned as Jon approached. They ride. To seek cure. His breath misted. Give them time. She nodded once. You have until the snows melt, Jon Snow. Then north or south, ally or enemy, choose. She walked away into darkness. Jon looked south to the faint trail of hooves. His heart felt rent between duty and love, fire and ice. Above, Rhaegal's pained bellow drifted, melding with moan of winter wind. The war they had thought won now revealed deeper roots, twisting beneath every hearthstone of the world. And far below, in the buried cavern under the crypt, the petrified weirwood face seeped a single droplet of black sap that hissed upon stone, like blood in snow, then vanished, leaving only silence and the promise of long night yet to come. Nah. Asida. PGSQSQ. Snow the color of bone sifted in silent flurries, veiling the moonlit marshes of the neck in luminous haze. Arya rode with her hood low, eyes narrowed against the sting of wind that carried the taste of brine and rot across the swaying reeds. Beside her, Gendry guided the black mare through a crooked path of half-frozen dikes, his warhammer lashed behind the saddle with strips of boiled leather. A dozen lengths ahead, Sandor Clegane plodded upon his destroyer, shoulders hunched like a cliff face beneath his patched bearskin. The mule he led dragged a travois laden with salt beef and casks of river water. Each creak of its harness stirred her nerves, for the next quiet was not the peace of safety, but the hush that falls before an arrow's whisper. They had been 6 days from Winterfell, weaving through abandoned croft houses, whose thatch sagged under snow, thicker each league. Twice they had glimpsed flaring pyres to the east, villages already claimed by the fever, and once the murk of the western swamps had spat forth 3 rag-wrapped reavers with blue sparks flickering behind their eyes. Arya's dagger felled one before his shriek reached the sky. Gendry stove the skull of a second, iron-crunching bone like marrow-filled ice. The third had fled, but not before prying dead fingers loose from a palm-sized shard of cerulean crystal. Even now it throbbed inside Arya's pouch like a weak but relentless heartbeat, answering the 2 she already bore. At dusk on the 7th day, a gray-green rise of crumbling stone resolved through the mist. Moat Cailin, ruinous gate of the north. The causeway before its mounds of tumbled basalt was clogged by wagons, corpses, Crates of moth-eaten grain. Wreckage left by refugees turned away or slaughtered by plague. She could not tell. Clegane swung down, sniffed the air. He kicked a barrel. It split, vomiting sour oats riddled with weevils. Stinks of dead men and drowned dogs. He growled. We camp upriver. They skirted the western flank, fording a sluggish tributary where the ground trembled beneath their mounts. Across the water, torches flickered inside torn banners. Serpents entwined, triskelions, a white falcon defaced with ash. Southern houses stranded by winter, their levees dying by inches. Arya glimpsed faces hollowed by fever, lips cracked black. Some reached weakly toward them, pleading without words. Gendry made the sign of the smith. Clegane spat. They pressed on. That night, rain of needle-thin ice ticked against their tent, and the marsh gurgled like a thing half alive. Arya dozed against Gendry's shoulder, yet woke at every snap of reed, every distant splash that might have been an oar or the footfall of something unliving. Near midnight, the shard in her pouch pulsed once, hard enough to bruise. She jolted upright, hand on needle. Beyond the tent flap, the world glowed faintly blue. She slipped out, barefoot on spongy moss. Across the camp, Clegane stood sword-naked, staring west. Upon a tump of mud 10 paces away hovered a figure woven of mist. A boy no taller than Bran had been the day he rode from Winterfell. His eyes were pits of starlight. His hair flowed like ripples through water. When he spoke, the voice was 1,000 streams beneath thin ice. The river seeks you, little cat. Arya's throat locked. You're not Bran. Not now. Not ever. Yet he lingers within the river's memory, and your steel tasted him. The figure's hand unfurled to reveal a larger shard, jagged as frozen lightning. Return what you stole. Let the currents merge. Them Darowel. Gendry emerged, hammer raised. The apparition turned, featureless face reflecting torch glow. The marsh wind sighed, extinguishing flame. Darkness swallowed the shape. When Clegane relit the fire with shaking flint, the tump was bare, the reeds whispering only rain. None slept again till sunrise. PGSQL. Dawn bled rust across the sky as they rode south into the green damp of the riverlands. At every river crossing, charred stakes displayed plague corpses, wearing crude symbols of the Lord of Light. A flaming heart gouged into ribs. A red-painted sun upon browned foreheads. Where the road forked near Maidenpool, they found the inn's sign torn down and replaced by a plank, on which someone had scratched in tar, burn, or bleed. Inside the common room, barrels of lamp oil ringed a dais stained black with old fire. Beneath them lay bones no bigger than a child's. Gendry looked away, knuckles white upon his hammer. They're cleansing the sick like woodless, or feeding fire with fear, Arya muttered. A gust rattled shutters. From a loft door, a gaunt woman appeared. Face the color of tallow. She clutched a newborn wrapped in sackcloth. Help us, she rasped. Arya stepped forward, but Clegane's mailed hand barred her chest. The woman's eyes shimmered, not brown or gray, but faint, watery blue. She smiled, lips cracking. River calls, she crooned. River rises. Before Arya could move, Clegane cast a torch at the oil barrels and kicked Gendry backward through the doorway. Flame whooshed, devouring shadows. The woman did not scream. She only watched the fire climb her shift as if greeting an old lover. They fled amid smoke and choking sparks. Outside, snow hissed where embers landed. SQL. 2 nights later, they splashed through the ford of the Trident where the Red Fork met the Tumblestone. Fires lit both banks, camps of outlaws, refugees, deserters. Some waved black banners bearing a broken wheel. Others brandished pitchforks painted with crude blue eyes. No guards contested their crossing. Fear had rendered every armed band a kingdom unto itself. On the south bank, they found a stretch of sand littered with cracked stone heads. Statues torn from sepulchres, faces smashed. The largest bore faint, stark features. Gendry knelt, brushing frost from its cheeks. Clegane nudged it with his boot. Remnants of some fuckwit prophecy, he said. Break the faces, break the past. Arya traced the faint lines where a crown once perched. or break the lords who failed them. They camped in a half-collapsed sept, whose stained glass roof had caved under snow. Moonlight slanted through shards, painting the marble floor in fractured blues and greens. Arya dreamed she was running down a corridor of mirrors, each reflection a season of her life. In the last mirror, Bran stood with eyes of living sap, saying, "Many waters cannot quench fire, neither can the floods drown love." She woke with tears dried upon her face, though she'd not remembered weeping. PGSQL. Across the reach, Jon Snow stood upon Winterfell's battlements under a noon sky thick with oily smoke. New granaries now lay ashes. Supplies shrank to weeks. Daenerys' unsullied patrolled walls side by side with northern spears, but trust eroded faster than rations. 3 clashes had erupted over stolen bread loaves. Grey Worm hanged the thieves before sunset, and mourners muttered that Dragon Queen starved the north to feed fire. In the Great Hall, Tyrion, Sam, and Maester Walken spread a parchment map littered with black pins. Towns lost to plague. Red pins. Towns razed by red priests, and blue shards indicating sabotage sites. The board looked a hedgehog bristling dread. "We cannot defend every hamlet," Tyrion said, voice cracked. "We must retreat, consolidate behind Wintertown's palisades." Jon studied the pins. The red priests burn all they deem corrupted. The shards corrupt what they cannot catch. 2 blades to the same spear. Sam tapped Old Town's mark. The starry sept still stands, but their bells toll funeral day and night. The harbor swarms with ships bearing the flaming heart. Archmaesters debate whether fire purges ice or feeds it. They write treatises while streets choke on ash. Walken, gaunt and trembling, added, 2 ravens arrived from King's Landing. Queen Dowager Cersei's son is proclaimed Aegon VI. They speak of purging the north with wildfire to burn the plague and demons both. Nemsen. Jon rubbed his eyes. Another Aegon. The realm bleeds from too many kings. Above the map, the roof's broken slats groaned beneath a sudden shake of wings. Rhaegal glided, scales dulled but healing. Drogon circled beyond, hunting. Jon recalled Daenerys' ultimatum, until snows melted. Yet snows showed no sign of melting. He turned to Sam. "Any word of Arya?" "Nothing since the Trident," Sam whispered. Jon stepped away, snow creaking beneath boots. He thought of words left unsaid, of blue shards pulsing in crypt dark pockets. Each dawn he laced on armor, half sure the next dusk would lay him in Bran's place beneath the heart tree. PGSQL. South and west, Arya's party skirted the ruins of Harrenhal, walls slick with ice that glittered beneath a bleached sun. In the burnt kitchens, they found pyres of rotting linen and rusty chains. A plague roost, abandoned after fever devoured its flock. Clegane wrenched a rusted cleaver from a corpse hand. The corpse jerked, blue light sputtering in sockets. He hacked its neck through, cursing. "They rise quicker now," Gendry muttered, wiping gore. "The ice needs less flesh." "Then we give it none," Arya said. Dawn on the 12th day brought pale warmth as they entered the hills of the Dornish marches. Snow thinned to patches among heath. Pine gave way to juniper. Brown cliffs reared like broken dragon teeth. Here plague thinned. They rode faster, breathing air that smelled of rosemary and salt. At Ashford by the Honeywine they met the first patrols of House Tarly, ragged but proud men barring roads to plague refugees under banners half singed. Their captain, Sir Harlan, recognized Gendry's Baratheon features and offered escort south. They refused politely but shared tidings. Highgarden's skeleton towered empty, its vaults looted by sellswords declaring loyalty to the one true Aegon. The Red Priest flotilla had burned Arbor vineyards and etched flame runes across gardens. Storm's End held, but famine gnawed. At last, after a fortnight of near-constant riding, salt wind kissed their faces. They crested a ridge and beheld the blue fork of the Torrentine spilled into turquoise sea. Beyond curved the pale lavender bluffs of Starfall. The castle atop the pale stone spine gleamed soft silver in afternoon light. Banners of white with a falling star snapped in brisk wind, but smoke drifted from the lower town. They rode switchback trails choked with refugees. Dornish smallfolk huddled among orange groves, coughing sores darkening faces. A man in maester's chains waved them through a barricade of overturned carts, shouting, "Plague to the west gate! Quarantine holds!" They skirted a path along the cliff to postern stairs carved through stone. There, beneath the shadow of a white tower called the Sky Reach, armed guards in silver half-helms challenged them. Arya stepped forward, hood thrown back. "I am Arya Stark of Winterfell. I seek Lady Nymeria Dane." The captain bowed yet blocked path. "Our lady's court is shuttered. Fever claims even the nobles. What business can risk her life?" Arya opened her pouch. The shard pulsed azure. Gasps rose. Some guards recoiled. Others reached for spears. "That plague, it comes from these," she said. "They must be destroyed. Your castle holds the blade that can." Murmurs. One guard sprinted up spiral steps. Minutes later, the postern opened. A woman in a white mantle, trimmed violet, appeared. She wore no helm. Lavender eyes matched the star on her breast. Her hair, sable with streaks of ash blonde, was bound by a silver fillet. Lady Nymeria Dane studied them, unreadable. "The wolf girl," she said softly. "I heard ravens speak of you. Come." They ascended a stair of sky-glass-colored pale blue by the sea light. At the summit, a high courtyard overlooked a fall sheer enough to churn the stomach. There, upon a stone dais, rested a sword on a black velvet cloth. Dawn, its milky blade faintly luminous, edges keen as sorrow. Nymeria halted before it. "You know its history." "No more than bards say," Arya answered. "Forged from the heart of a fallen star. Sir Arthur Dane bore it to the Tower of Joy." Nymeria's gaze dipped. "He died there, and Dawn returned. None have wielded it since, until its rightful heir is proven." She looked up. "Why should that heir be you?" Arya untied her pouch, spilling 3 shards. Blue pulses throbbed like veins cut from living flesh. "Because the world ends if we fail." Nymeria extended a gloved hand. "May I?" Arya nodded. The lady lifted a shard between finger and thumb. It brightened. Sparks licking glove. Crying out, she dropped it. Dawn flared suddenly, responding. Lines of white fire raced along its length, reflecting on Nymeria's wide eyes. "It sings," she whispered. The shards ceased pulsing. Dawn's light subsided. Nymeria faced Arya. "If the sword accepts you, you may bear it. But Dawn warrants a trial of worth. Not steel against steel, but memory against truth." Clegane snorted. "Memory seldom survives truth." Nymeria gestured to a low stone archway. "Within lies the Cave of Echoes. Step beneath with the sword, face what it shows, and return living. Only then may you wield Dawn." Arya approached the blade. Its glassy metal felt cool, lighter than needle yet heavy with history. The moment her fingers wrapped the grip, a soft chime rang, like distant crystal bells in high wind. She lifted it. Cloudy opalescence rippled down the fuller, settling into a glow that matched the moonlit sheen of winter ice. Gendry touched her shoulder. "We go with you." "Alone," Nymeria said. "Echoes answer only the one who holds the star." Arya squeezed his hand, then turned into the arch. PGSQL. The cave corkscrewed downward, walls sweating, luminous fungus. Footsteps echoed, but sometimes the echoes ran ahead, returning words she had not spoken. Fragments of songs, childhood laughter. The path ended at a round cavern, where water dripped from stalactites into a polished obsidian pool. At its rim stood 6 stone pylons, each carved with sigils she knew. Direwolf, lion, dragon, stag, kraken, 3-eyed raven. Fireflies drifted above the water, their glow pulsing in time with Arya's heart. No, with Dawn in her grasp. She stepped to the pool. The surface shimmered, then clarified into a scene of Winterfell on a summer day. Her father sparring Bran while she giggled behind a tree. Eddard Stark looked up, straight at her, though she knew she was not truly there. "Trouble?" he asked, voice water soft. Tears stung. "I lost you," she whispered. "No," the reflection said. You walked a different road. I am with you as long as duty drinks from honor. Now and the image dissolved into the lion pylon. Cersei atop the throne of swords, wildfire green in her eyes. Honor, she sneered. Honor burned my children, burned the world. It's the only way to love. Arya lifted Dawn, its light cut the vision apart, and wildfire sparks hissed into mist. Up rose the dragon. Daenerys on Drogon, ash snow swirling. She reached toward Arya, pleading, "Am I monster or mother? Tell me how to choose." Arya could not answer. Dawn's glow dimmed. She wondered if mercy and murder might share the same face. The dragon vision faded. Next, the stag. Gendry, but crowned, hammer slick with blood that dripped molten gold. He smiled at her, but behind the smile his eyes glazed blue. She slashed Dawn through the image. It fractured like ice. Kraken pillar then. Theon in life, kneeling under the heart tree as cold took his limbs, repeating, "I am the tide, I am the tide." She lowered the blade, grief thudding. The image crumbled to black sand. The final pylon, the raven, showed Bran seated by roots that writhed into the shape of a throne. His face split. One half warm boy, the other flickering glacier. He spoke both voices. "Kill me, save me, kill me, save me." Arya's soul shrieked. She fell to knees, Dawn's tip clanging stone. Tears dotted its milky surface, turning to prisms. She whispered, "I did." At that admission the cave trembled. All 6 pylons glowed, beams converging on Dawn. The sword blazed white as noon's sun on snow. From its core burst a pulse that raced the cavern walls, dissolving every lingering shadow vision. A hush followed, deeper than night, under winter's cloak. Dawn's light ebbed to gentle radiance. Arya rose. Her reflection watched from the pool, her hair braided, cheeks scarred, eyes ancient. Yet behind her own figure another stood, Bran whole, smiling faintly. He bowed his head, then stepped back into the dark. She carried Dawn up the spiral into dying day. PGSQL. Nymeria waited beside a brazier, the sky bleeding copper over the sea. When Arya emerged, sword aglow, the lady knelt and pressed 2 fingers to her own brow. "So dawn rises again," she murmured. "May its bearer heal the world." She gifted Arya scabbard and harness of silvered leather. Clegane grunted approval. Gendry stared awestruck, half loving, half afraid. They spent the night in a tower room, whose windows looked upon leagues of starlit waves. The shards on the trestle table no longer pulsed. They lay dull, as if dawn's brilliance had silenced their heartbeats. Yet toward midnight, Arya felt them twitch faintly, as though distant thunder stirred. In the courtyard below, a funeral pyre flared. Nymeria's cousin, dead by fever. The flames cast wandering silhouettes across parapets. Arya wondered whether every pyre now kindled across Westeros drew the shard's malice, feeding night, even as it ate the flesh. When she slipped to the battlements, she found Nymeria there, gazing north. Violet eyes reflected constellations. "Smoke on the horizon," Nymeria said. "Your queen has begun her campaign. An island fortress 5 leagues north burned at dusk. Grief of Vulture King Hill." She exhaled. "Fire against plague, dragon remedy." Arya's grip tightened on Dawn's pommel. "She'll burn every holdfast that refuses her. But shards hide among the ashes. Fire won't cure what it can't scorch. And I know why. And Dawn may cut their bond." She lifted a shard. Dawn flashed, and the shard cracked, a hair-thin fissure glowing pale pink. When she set blade aside, the crack sealed, but only at the sword's kiss. Nymeria's brow furrowed. A sword cannot cleave an army alone. Then armies must bring the shards to the blade. Arya met her eyes. "Ride with me." Dawn rose from starfall. "Let its light return by your hand, too. I've plague in my gates. Plague will follow us north either way. But if we slay its bound spirit, the fever may fade." Nymeria studied her, jaw set. 8 dawns, First light. The Danes ride. PG, SQL. News of Arya's success reached Winterfell on wind-torn parchment carried by a white raven. Its message bore Lady Dane's seal and only 8 words: sword reborn, shards fracture, we ride by dawnlight. Jon read it thrice, heart hammering. He found Daenerys upon the wall, watching columns of unsullied march for a cleansing of White Harbor. He held the raven out. Hope comes. She scanned the words. Her expression flickered. How many leagues lie between hope and snowdrifts? Few. If we hold, he said. Hold. She gestured east, where Rhaegal lay in the godswood, wound seeping. My dragon bleeds. My men bury their brothers. Every night saboteurs slit more throats. The North offers graves, not gratitude. Jon forced calm. Your reign rests on saving them, not burning them. It rests on breaking the wheel, she countered. But I see only cogs grinding my people. He stepped closer. Stay your fire a little longer. Dawn approaches, both the sword and the sun. He pointed to the horizon, where frost clouds cracked to reveal a band of pale rose. Let light test ice before flame scorches all. Her eyes softened, yet pain dwelt within. You beg patience, while another Aegon claims my throne? Thrones can wait. Lives cannot. Grey Worm approached, helm under arm. Your Grace, the Unsullied stand ready. Ships leave harbor at high tide. Delay risks plague spreading to the fleet. Daenerys looked from Lord Commander to Jon. Snowflakes dusted her braids, melting to droplets that glimmered like tears. She nodded slowly. Hold the fleet a day. If your sword of mourning does not arrive, we sail. Jon sagged with relief. From behind columns, he spied Sansa watching. Unreadable. Arya's absence weighing on her like unspoken prophecy. Vibna net. In the bite, Asha Greyjoy found war sooner than expected. Her longship, Black Wind, sliced foam under a sky streaked orange with alchemist's fire. Euron's leviathans loomed ahead, hulls armored in scorched iron, sails dyed crimson. Between masts, cages dangled bodies half-charred yet still twitching, blue fire-licking wounds, shards anchored in their chests. The screams carried miles on wind. Asha's 60 ships faced 120, but she had something Euron lacked. Allies in white sails bearing Martell suns and Dornish spears thirsty for Kraken blood. Sunfire's captain, Lady Nym, nodded across the waves. The fleets formed a pincer. Drums thundered. Grapnels flew. Euron appeared atop Silence's forecastle, patchless eye blazing azure. He laughed, arms spread. Sister, the river begs you drown. At his gesture, bound forms were hurled into the sea, each weighed by chain and shard. The water around them froze in spurts, spawning whites that clawed hulls. Spears cracked skulls. Flametosers rained pitch. Still, the undead climbed. Asha's mind flashed to Arya's words. Shards anchor spirits. Dawn might break them. But dawn was leagues away. She bellowed for the wildfire casks. In a heartbeat, green gold inferno roared across the sea, engulfing whites and half a dozen ironborn sloops. Steam clouds boiled skyward. Flesh and shard alike sank to scalding depths. Euron's laughter carried through flame. He donned a helm crowned by a single shard, long as a dagger, glowing, throbbing. Lightning cracked. Wind howled. Silence surged forward like a leviathan, ramming Black Wind amidships. Asha staggered. The deck split. She glimpsed Euron leaping across the gap, axe raised. Their blades met with a clang that jarred her bones. Blue sparks danced along his edge, wherever it kissed the shard set into his helm. They fought among burning planks. Around them sailors screamed, drowned, burned, or turned, eyes igniting. Asha parried, retreated, slipped on gore. Euron's laughter echoed. See, sister, the river knows no tide but mine. No sea. Asha's back struck a charred mast. Euron raised the axe. A hammer's head smashed into his jaw. Gendry Baratheon stood on splintered bulwark, breathing steam. Behind him, Sandor Clegane wielded a long pole topped with reflective star steel. Dawn bound to a lance. Arya crouched atop rigging, cloak whipping. "Guess again," she hissed, launching. She and Euron clashed mid-deck. Dawn's radiance sparked across boards like sunrise upon water. Each time blade nicked his axe, flecks of blue flew, sizzling. He howled, retreating. Arya swept Dawn down. The sword clove through iron helm, through the glowing shard, through bone. Euron's eyes widened, light extinguishing. He crumpled. The shard fell in halves, their cores gray. Silence lurched, momentum lost. Around the fleet, whites convulsed, free of unseen strings, then fell limp into boiling surf. The sea hissed, as though exhaling a breath long held. Gendry caught Arya as the deck canted. Flames skirted tubs of pitch. "We need to go," Clegane roared from the gunwale. Boats free. They leapt to a skiff, cutting ropes as black wind broke apart. Dornish ships closed, catching Stormland survivors. Above, dawn burned away smoke to reveal a sky clear and cruel. Asha, clinging to Strake, spat seawater. "Remind me never to gamble against Starks." Arya sheathed Dawn. "Gamble instead against rivers." PGSQL. 2 days sail later, battered remnants of 3 fleets reached White Harbor. The city's outer villages smoldered from Daenerys' recent cleansing. Houses empty, but plague's fires still licking timbers. The survivors staggered ashore, half blinded by smoke and sun. From Winterfell, a raven had preceded them. "Hold fast, Dragon Queen awaits proof." Arya rode north with her small band, dawn wrapped in wool yet glowing through fabric whenever shards drew near. And shards lay everywhere, embedded in snowbanks like slivers of star glass, lodged in dead animals, strung as charms by desperate peasants, praying frost-warded plague. Each shattered beneath Dawn's kiss, leaving inert dust. At marshy Barrowlands they found Tywin's Fist, an earthwork fort now refugee camp. A red priest preached that only fire burns sin clean. Dawn's light sliced his spare shard staff, and his flock fled screaming. The priest begged mercy, eyes reverting brown as fragments snapped. Arya left him sobbing in morning frost, unsure if absolution or ruin had claimed him. On the eve of the 20th day since leaving Winterfell, they crested a ridge and saw its walls half buried in snowdrifts. Dragons crouched atop towers like gargoyles. Smoke from small fires drifted. No giant conflagrations yet. The gatehouse opened, revealing Jon flanked by Ghost and 20 guards. Arya dismounted. Dawn's silver leather harness crossed her back, the blade's pommel showing starburst. Jon's relief shone. "You have it." She nodded, then drew the sword. Light spilled white gold, washing snow in brilliance. Gasps rose. Daenerys descended steps, cloak snapping like raven wings. She studied the blade, then the shards Arya poured onto a cloth and shattered under its edge. Each cracked with a sigh of wind. The queen's eyes widened. "It breaks them." "Not burns, breaks," Arya said. Tyrion tilted head. "Ice undone by light older than forge." Sam knelt, collecting fragments. "Cold seams. Dead now." Daenerys sheathed Valyrian stiletto at her waist. "Then give me the sword. I'll fly across Westeros cleaving shards from skyback." Arya wiped Dawn. "It guided itself only in my grip." Daenerys' brow arched. "Are you the only savior, girl?" Jon intervened. "She bears it for now. Let us test." They tested that evening. In the crypt, Arya touched Dawn to the petrified weirwood face. A tremor rippled. Black sap withdrew, leaving gray grain smooth. The air warmed. Sansa wept, feeling dread ease. In the yard, Arya pressed blade to Rhaegal's infected wound. Light flared. Blue veins receded. Scales knit. The dragon roared skyward, free. Daenerys' eyes filled with tears. She touched Dawn's flat reverently. "Keep it," she said hoarsely. "But ride with me. A dragon's wings will carry your light farther than any horse." Arya met Jon's gaze. Memories of Bran's warning echoed. When love counts cost, will fury pay debt? She took a breath. I'll fly. But the light must not become another weapon for tyranny. Daenerys straightened. I am no tyrant, nor slayer of cities? Arya asked, quiet. Daenerys flinched but nodded. Help me prove otherwise. Jon stepped aside, understanding dawning. Ghost and I guard the north. Go. At dawn, Arya mounted a new saddle behind Daenerys on Drogon. Dawn sheathed at her hip, hummed like wind in a high pass. Rhaegal flew beside, scars stiff but strong. Grey Worm saluted. Sansa raised the Stark banner, direwolf over sunrise. They soared south, shadows painting frost. Below, fragments embedded in men, beasts, earth and sea crackled, sensing the star steel's approach, their blue hearts flickering in dread or rage. Wind tore Arya's braid, stole her breath, but dawn's light stayed steady. A comet tail of promise across the dawning sky. The world held its breath as Dragonfire and Morningstar, fire and light, hunted a river of night that yet writhed beneath snow-blind hills. And for the first time since Bran's eyes turned blue, hope rode the wind. Jon watched till they vanished beyond cloud, then turned to the tasks left, feeding a city, healing distrust, waging truth against rumor. He glanced toward the crypt. He imagined Bran's smile, half boy, half beyond. Guide her, he murmured. Far below in dark soil, the last drop of black sap hardened into brittle crystal, drained of power. And somewhere, miles distant, in a cave none yet knew, a face carved of ancient, dead wood cracked along old seams, splitting, sighing, crumbling at last to dust beneath the newborn warmth of a dawn that might, if will proved stronger than fear, break the wheel and set the shattered river of the world to heal. In K. PGSQL. Wind knifed across the sky with winter's lingering bite as Drogon's wings battered the clouds apart. Frost sheared away in glittering vortices, falling behind the black dragon like a storm of ground glass tumbling into nothingness. Arya crouched forward against the ridged scales, leather-gloved fingers hooked under a spike just ahead of the saddle. Even through wool and hide, she felt the furnace heat rolling upward from the vast muscles, driving every thunderous downstroke. Daenerys sat before her, posture straight, palms loose on the anchor straps, spine moving with the rhythm of the beast she had called child for half her life. Together they cut southward along the coast. A dark star, not of omen but of decision, too swift for arrow or prayer. Dawn's hilt throbbed beneath Arya's arm like a second pulse. The sword's milky blade remained sheathed, yet she felt its presence, exact and intimate, as though the legend forged into it were a living thing that breathed in cadence with her heart. Each minute or so the blade warmed. Each warmth coincided with a faint gleam of blue on the distant earth below. A pocket of the corrupted shards, reacting to their hunter's approach like worms shrinking from sunlight. In time, the glimmer faded. Arya could not be sure whether it meant the shard had gone dormant, or if the blade's ore reached even this high, shattering stone and spirit at a distance. Either way, the pockets were thinning. That was hope enough to set her jaw against the wind and endure. Below, coastline unspooled in jagged curves. Broken holdfasts, smoldering fishing villages, stretches of barren rock where once there had been green pasture. Here and there the white towers of a lighthouse or a watchkeep still stood, but their fires burned no longer. On the third evening they circled above a spit of land where a sept of the seven had been turned into a funeral pyre. Charred beams formed a black ribcage around the cracked foundations, and green-tinted plumes crept skyward in the dusk. Red priests. Arya felt her throat tighten around a knot of memory. The whispers at Maidenpool, the weeping mother wrapped in flame. Dawn sang softly at her side, a shiver rather than a sound. She wanted to drop astride the corpse of stone below and carve the blue heart out of every corpse until the fires quenched. But Daenerys pressed her thigh and signaled forward. No time now. The sky accepted them into its darkening vault. They traveled large half-arcs, down the coast of the Vale, then back inland, over the Green Fork. then south across the rolling marches. At each bend, they dove to a mere 100 feet above the ground, Arya unlashing herself just enough to lean outward and extend her free hand. Sometimes when a shard's glow erupted too fierce for caution, she drew Dawn half a finger's length. The sword flared white gold, and the ice-blue pulse below shattered into a silent snowfall of ghost light. Within 2 heartbeats the field went cold. Twice they found whole columns of refugees marching in the twilight, stumbling north like shoals of half-dead fish. Each column seemed guided by a pair of gaunt figures in red mantles that billowed strangely without wind. Those figures carried staffs topped with crystalline slivers, each sliver a beacon bluer and hotter than the last. Daenerys banked Drogon into a stoop. Arya stood in the stirrups, drew Dawn to the starburst crossguard, and light speared the dusk. On the 11th night, the cold stars vanished behind fast, low clouds. Hail rattled metallic on scales and leather. Daenerys pointed ahead, the wide mouth of the Mander, black and swollen, reflecting only the ruddiest smear of moon behind the storm. Off the port wing soared Rhaegal, strong now, scar-patched with new green scale. He carried 2 passengers, Lady Nymeria Dane and a slim, hooded scout of Starfall who spoke little and watched everything, Sir Orn Norvoshi by name, sworn as Dane's shield and, as Arya quickly learned, a quietly deadly archer whose white-fletched shafts found vision slits at 400 paces. The sight of a woman other than Daenerys astride a dragon had left mouths agape in every camp they passed, but it made a fierce, intuitive sense. One guardian of dawn upon living wings, another sentinel upon blades of air. They made camp on a crag above the river. Fires were forbidden. Only small braziers, charcoal muffled in ash, glowed in dug pits to warm numb hands. Daenerys walked the perimeter, while Arya knelt with Dawn unsheathed across her knees. Gendry hunched nearby, fitting a new haft to his hammer. The great weapon had broken a rung out of Silence's stern railing when he leaped to black wind to strike Euron. His hands moved deftly, dropping iron rivets into glowing sockets of oak, driving them home with a mallet. Sparks jittered upward, orange motes devoured by darkness. Arya watched, content in the silent rhythm. Strike, breathe. Strike, breathe. She liked that he did not speak unless words mattered. The last rivet went in. The haft cooled. He nodded to her, eyes glinting in starlight, and she knew he would follow wherever dawn beckoned next. Sleep skimmed her only briefly before visions rose. Bran at the heart tree, mouth stitched by threads of ice, pointing southward, where a black sun rolled across the sky. Each heartbeat it grew. Each rotation pulled the daylight behind it like a curtain sliding shut. She jolted awake, pulse hammering. Dawn lay on her lap, pearl white, silent. Yet the stars above were oddly dim. She stood, then realized they were not dim at all. The heavens were clear. It was the ground. It glowed. Along the riverbank, half a mile downslope, thousands of pinpricks of sky-blue light threaded through waving grass and flood-washed cane. It looked like a colony of fireflies gone mad. Arya nudged Gendry. He looked, hissed a curse. Daenerys hurried over, cloak snapping. In the next instant the ground shook, as though something vast were crawling up from beneath the flooded earth. One by one the lights rose. Here a pair, there a dozen, until wire-thin silhouettes emerged around them. Whites? No. Doe. These things were still flesh, but their flesh bore runes etched in frost, and at the center of each forehead glowed an embedded shard, no larger than a finger's joint. Hundreds. A legion. Sandor Clegane, leaner than ever, hair wild, strode from behind a boulder and stared. 7 hells, all of them marked. Nymeria, perched on a ledge with bow, signaled Orn. 3 arrowheads sparked moonlight, then vanished into the night with a flutter and 3 tiny pops. Shafts exploded to powder before striking. Magic shield. Arya swallowed. If arrows failed, only Dawn could break the shards. But Dawn's aura flickered. This many hearts of ice together wove a resistance against the sword's promise. Mount, Daenerys commanded. Arya vaulted to Drogon's neck. Gendry and Clegane scrambled to the mule, slapping reins. Rhaegal launched first, Nymeria's mantle snapping like a comet's tail. Drogon followed, talons shrieking against stone. The legion below raised its eyes. A single, collective moan rumbled. Low, layered, as if every throat sang one note of warning. Then entire ranks leveled spears crowned with slivers of ice instead of steel. At some unheard signal, those slivers bloomed into sheets of argent lightning, and bolts lanced skyward. Drogon rolled. Arya's stomach yanked sideways, wind roared. Bolts flashed across the night, missing by wing beats but close enough to leave convulsions of cold along her cheek. Daenerys shouted, words lost. Smoke jetted from Drogon's throat, caught in wind, flung behind. Fire would not suffice. These spears were something older than dragon flame, seemingly born from the same physics that gave dawn its antithesis. North Bank, Arya cried. Daenerys heard, wrenched reins. Drogon veered. The bolts tracked, but Rhaegal dropped, rolling at 90 degrees, and the line of fire split to chase the lower dragon. Nymeria pressed flat, Orn loosed rope-headed arrows trailing few sparks. They whipped around the spears, detonated red flares that blinded the front files, buying heartbeats. Across the water stood a tumble of half-flooded ruins. Pillars pale with moonwash. Broken colonnades sprouting vines. Dragonstone once kept a summer manse here for envoys, long abandoned. Daenerys angled down. Drogon's talons smashed flagstones, skidding to a halt behind a shattered portico. Arya leapt clear, dawn in hand. As soon as the blade cleared leather, the entire ruin lit with brilliant white. The legion's spearbolts converged, but this time light met light. Dawn flared, and every incoming streak exploded into petals of star shards that whined away like moth wings. Across the riverbank, confusion splintered the ranks. Arya breathed through her teeth. We go to them. She ran 3 strides, sprang atop a cracked altar, and balanced on the balls of her feet. Dawn swung in a horizontal arc, leaving a bright slipstream that did not fade. It pulsed twice, like a heart pulling blood, then released a single wave of radiance that rippled across the river in a sheet no thicker than a page of glass. Where the wave passed, the spearheads shattered into dust. The shards set in brows splintered as if hammered from within. Bodies stiffened, then crumpled, no longer pulled by silent puppeteer strings. Gendry, arriving on foot, gaped. Smith preserve us. Arya wheeled, breathing hard. The pulse had drained her. Dawn's glow dimmed slightly. She saw Nymeria's dragon bank overhead, wings hissing. Lady Dane gestured west, where 2 other pockets of blue now glinted. Reinforcements summoned by the legion's cry. The river reflected them like twin comets, streaking faster than hoof or man could run. Clearly more priests with shards and scepters, driving the conscripts. Arya steadied Dawn's tip. She could shatter these lesser nodes from afar, maybe twice more, but at cost. Power bled, and what if stronger shards lay beyond? We need to kill the source, she gasped. Daenerys slid off Drogon, boots splashing in shallow water. The priests will continue birthing armies out of fear until the fire takes the world. If we can find their font. Old town, Orn's quiet voice said, stepping from behind a fallen lintel. His thread of speech carried finality. The Hightower hearth still burns. They gather there, highest flame in Westeros, to sanctify shard into holy relic. Nay. Nymeria guided Rhaegal lower. Starfall scouts saw pillars of green-tinged smoke above the whispering sound. 3 nights passed. Daenerys exhaled. Then Old Town is the heart of this war. Arya wiped rain from her brow. Her limbs shook from the wave strike. Old Town, and Old Town stands behind stone walls as thick as Winterfell's inner keep. 1 million living souls within. Some infected, some not. If we storm it with dragons, they'll ignite wildfire under every street. Nocturne. So we strike not with dragons, Nymeria said, dismounting to knee-deep floodwater unharmed. We go under. Arya scowled. Tunnels. Catacombs, Nymeria answered. Starfall families traced lines to Hightower once. I studied maps decades old. Crypts under the Sept connect to the black cells under the Citadel. If ice roots there, we can cut it before priests sense dawn's approach. Gendry snorted breath. Break into the greatest library in the world? To save it, Samwell Tarly said behind them. All heads turned. He rode a shaggy Garin too small for his girth, escorted by 2 Manderly spearmen. He climbed down, boots skidding on wet marble. Ravens reached us as you flew. I brought what notes remain from the Night's Watch about black tunnels under the Night Fort. They show matching sigils on door archways replicated nowhere except Old Town. He patted a sealed parchment case, strapped to his saddle. A secret road from north to south. The first builders of the wall left signposts. Dennery smiled. A flicker of warmth in hard times. You came far, Sam. He puffed, exhausted but determined. Farther still to go, Your Grace. Arya opened her mouth but froze. Dawn hummed again. Across the river, one figure still stood among heaps of bodies, a red mantle flapping. The mage, if mage he was, held a shattered staff in shaking hands. Where the shard had been, a jagged stump dripped blue fire. His face was half burned, his eyes burned wholly. He lifted his other hand, let out a ragged howl, and plunged fingers into his own chest. Ice crackled. A sphere of frost expanded, seizing nearby corpses. They jerked upright, eyes reigniting. Shards inside fractured skulls knitting whole again. Arya stumbled. The sword's wave had broken every gem, yet here they were reforming, feeding on the mage's blood oath. No, she whispered. He's siphoning himself. Daenerys leapt on Drogon. But Nymeria had already signaled. Rhaegal dove. Dragonfire churned the river in a corona of green and black. Steam erupted. Arya jumped back from the scalding wave. When it cleared, the mage was ash. Gendry exhaled. Fire can end them too, if we catch the caster before he folds the ice inward. Which he never lets us, Arya said. Old Town first. Dort. They rode out before sunrise, scouts ahead, dragons behind. Sam rode with Clegane, the hound muttering that horses couldn't outrun plague but might outrun a coward's bravery. The rest smiled, tired smiles. Even gloom needs laughter's thread to hold breath. They skirted Bitterbridge by dawn's pink memory. Corpses floated down the Mander. Some with marks, some without. Nymeria's flush-cheeked outriders galloped into orchard groves, returning with fallen citrus to stave off scurvy weeks yet distant. Overhead, the sky cleared to vast blue. Arya felt dawn warming against her spine. Every half-mile she sensed a shard in hedge or barn. She dismounted, touched blade to earth, and let the light run beneath sod like quicksilver. Without fail, the shard cracked. The emptiness where power had been each time felt a little deeper, as though some vast cistern were draining drop by drop toward a dry clatter at the bottom. She wondered, would they drain the night, or simply stir it to new channels? 3 days out, they passed the ruins of Brightwater Keep. Outer walls smoke-slick, central tower collapsed inward. Wild dog packs roamed the gardens. In the rubble, Sam found a crossed pair of broken scepters fused by rune marks into a fragile archway, proof the priests had tested binding spells on masonry. Dawn shattered the arch. Half the keep collapsed in final defeat, and dust rose like parchment ash caught in wind. They pressed on. On the 9th day, Sam's maps led them to forgotten men-white meadows, where low hills bulged with barrows older than Empire. Their stone stair wound downward into peaty blackness. Torches smoldered green when held near the threshold. Residue of sorcery, fresh. Gendry swung his hammer, cracking the lintel. Symbols flared blue, then died. Arya unsheathed Dawn. The sword's glow bounced off damp walls, painting wet graffiti in silver tracery. Onward. The tunnel angled gradually beneath the high road, then leveled into a room where 3 doors waited. North, west, south. Runes above the southern arch matched Sam's parchment. They passed, sand crunching under boots. The ceiling dripped. Tiny worms clung to moss, luminous. The air tasted of salt, Cold Town's distant brine. Hours blurred. They marched by the sword's pale lamp, pausing twice when Orn clucked warning. Voices ahead. The first time they found 2 priests, kneeling around a brazier of blue flame, chanting. Asha drew a knife to end them, but Arya signaled stillness. Instead, she let dawn's light swell through the crack in wall rock. The flames sputtered. The priests collapsed, shards blackening in their throats. The second time, deeper, a company of plague-ridden zealots dragged litters bearing the sick. They parted, whispering, "Lightbringer," at sight of the glow. Sam shook with sorrow as they pressed handkerchiefs to weeping sores and begged for flame's embrace. Dawn would heal ice, not rot. No help she could give, yet shards gleamed in two porters' palms. One touch broke them. Perhaps the fever would ease now. Or perhaps hope alone would. She could not dwell. Finally, the tunnel divided into rough-hewn stairs spiraling up. The air grew warmer, thick with incense. They stopped under a grate where beams of golden afternoon filtered. Above, muffled chants, bells, the crackle of torches. Sam whispered, "The Starry Sept's lower vestry." Beyond that, the Hightower cellars. They planned. Clegane, Gendry, Orne would hold the tunnel. Sam and Nymeria would scour library annexes for scrolls referencing shard lore. Arya and Daenerys would ascend first, dawn ready, to cut out the priest's battery. Dragons could not fit. Daenerys would fight on foot, with dragonglass dagger and the fire in her veins. Arya hoisted herself silently through the grate, marble flags cool under palms. She crouched behind a column. Across a wide circular chamber, 10 priests in red and orange knelt around a pit. From the pit rose a pillar of ice crystal, a man tall, heart blue. It pulsed. Each pulse sent threads of frost across surrounding floor where white-robed acolytes scattered ashes. Between pulses, they poured wildfire onto the crystal, chanting, "Ice is the mold, fire the forge, light be the blade." Each surge of green flame licked ice but did not melt. Instead, it fused, growing it. Arya swallowed bile. They were birthing a new Night King. She signaled. Daenerys rolled behind an obelisk of black marble. Sam eased Grate aside. Gendry loomed half through. Dawn grew brighter and brighter. "Now," Arya whispered. She rose and hurled 2 throwing daggers. One lodged in the spine of the western priest, the other in the throat of the eastern. Daenerys stormed out, dagger blazing with real flame, Valyrian steel heated by dragon blood. She plunged it into the liver of a second priest before the man had time to gasp. The ring broke. Acolytes shrieked. Arya bounded between them toward the pillar. Every instinct screamed to sever power before it surged. She raised Dawn, brought the star steel down like an executioner's moon. White met blue. Crack, echo thundered the length of the sept. The pillar fissured, lightning dancing through imperfections. But at the same instant, 2 surviving priests thrust their own shards into the crystal base, offering blood. The ice drew it, healed, reacted. It flared in blinding flare so bright shadows fled. Arya staggered, seeing blue afterimages. In that disorientation, one priest seized Daenerys, slamming her against a column. She dropped the dagger. He raised a shard spear and froze. A hammer pulverized his skull. Gendry shoveled the corpse aside. The ice pillar shrieked, no longer voice of wind, but of centuries colliding. Fissures closed, reopened. A shape coalesced inside the column. Antlers of frost, ribcage of glowing veins. The figure lifted its chin and looked straight at Arya. The eyes were Bran's. "River," it whispered through crystal walls. "Return to sea." Arya's breath stopped. A tear burned down her cheek. "You chose this." "I chose dawn," the imprisoned voice answered. "And dawn demands night be whole before breaking." She shook her head. "We broke you. Twice. You broke the vessel, not the water. The water flows. The sea is vast. But the tide turns upon one stone. Throw me." "Nater stay. In her way." The crystal brightened, pulsing like births of stars. Nymeria yelled from the grate, acolytes climbing out of side passages, shards in hands. Fire erupted as Sam overturned braziers. Smoke filled vaults. Arya understood suddenly. Bran's consciousness, the 3-eyed raven, rode the river of ice shards, guiding them but trying to stay them. He'd surrendered himself to bind the night within a prison of flame and frost, where both forces stalemated. But the priests fed the stalemate, hoping to birth a weapon unbound by either. "Throw me," Bran repeated, voice weakening. She nodded. Gendry saw her eyes, saw intent. Without words, he hefted hammer again, crushed a chunk at the crystal base, weakening it. Daenerys drew deep, called an inner fire. She exhaled flames so intense, it drew arcs of orange lightning across the chamber. Ice melted, smoked, then vaporized. Cracks spider-webbed. Arya plunged on in a thrust born of every area of silent prayer she'd kept since the Godswood. The sword stabbed through, hit something not quite solid, then emerged in frost behind. She tore sideways. The pillar exploded in a roar. A wave of air hurled everyone to the floor. When ringing eased, she crawled to knees. Where the column had stood there remained a whirling void. No ice, no flame. Just collapse, a darkness sucking light. Bran's form, faint, hovered at its rim. He raised hand, index finger pointing up, then dissolved into motes of silver dust that spiraled into the void. The floor groaned. Marble cracked. Smoke from wildfire poured into the hole, vanishing. The suction lessened, then quiet. Arya panted. The shards embedded in priests around the room dulled, black. Acolytes sobbed. Gendry helped Daenerys stand, her cheeks streaked in soot, eyes wet. "Where did he go?" she asked. "To the sea," Arya whispered. "I pray the tide rests." Sam, coughing, surveyed chamber. If the central well is gone, shards no longer share song. They'll die out like sparks in snow. Nymeria retrieved Dawn, wiped it clean. Then dawn indeed. Yet above, bells tolled. The city aflame in irregular towers. Orn returned from a corridor. "Problem," he said softly. "Priests set pyres in every square. Wildfire stalks primed to light if central pulse ceased. They interpret silence as sign to purge." Nabisamotwound. Daenerys turned, eyes narrowing. "Then dragons fly." Arya sheathed Dawn. "This time the fire is ours." Hours blurred. Drogon and Rhaegal rose through the starry sept oculus, scattering shards of stained glass in a jeweled rain. Smoke plumes marked pyres across the city. Dragon strikes swooped low, tails slamming casks of wildfire away from crowds. Wings fanning flame into motes where it sputtered harmless. Arya balanced behind Daenerys, sighting clusters of red priests. She guided Dawn like a painter's brush. With each downward slash, white beams arced, seeking the shards in zealot staves, bursting them before the priests could hurl flame. Citizens cheered, though some fled. Certain judgment arrived. But dragons spared roofs. They targeted only fires and priests. Word spread. The queen saved, not burned. Through smoke gaps, Arya glimpsed Maester's square. Citadel novices formed bucket lines. Sam ran among them, robe flapping, shouting, "Pour water, not oil." Somewhere Clegane howled at novices blocking his mule path. Gendry hammered loose the last barricade to the docks, releasing tidewater that flooded narrow lanes and quenched embers. Lady Nymeria loosed her archers, shafts pinning runaway priests to alley walls until guards seized them. By dusk, bells turned from alarm to thanksgiving. Daenerys circled once more before alighting atop the Hightower balcony. The old town's sun, deep red, kissed horizon as though dipping to test its reflection. Arya slid off into wind heavy with salt and ash. She stared across rooftops, listening. No chanting, no screams. Just gulls and distant cough of surf. Dawn's blade reflected sun and blood together. "It is finished," Daenerys murmured beside her. Arya paused. "Until the next ambition finds the next shard. We will melt them all," Daenerys answered. But her voice held acceptance, vigilance endless. Days later, ravens bore tidings to Winterfell. Plague waning, red priests in chains, wildfire stores doused, shards ground to dust beneath hammers forged of dawn steel filings. Jon read the letter thrice. Heart lifting. Sansa lifted her goblet, whispered that perhaps summer might come again. Ghost howled to a sky no longer bruised by smoke. In Old Town's harbor of the Honeywine, Daenerys knelt on ash-cooled stone among townsfolk. She held out a chalice of clean water to a fevered child. Arya stood behind, sword across back. Unseen guardian. Asha's repaired longships anchored offshore. Sails furled, crews singing low. Real songs again. Gendry, sleeves rolled. Forged nails for rebuilding piers. Sam catalogued scrolls saved from the burning, eyes wide as he discovered treatises lost 500 years. Nymeria and Orne plotted an order of wardens sworn to roam and smash any relic of shardcraft before it budded. Clegane complained but sharpened their steel. That night of final rest, Arya slipped from the Hightower garden to the seawall. She unsheathed Dawn, watched it glow. The blade seemed calmer, its pulse slowed. She whispered Bran's name, and the tide answered, not in words, but in hush, a lull of waves easing against stone. She took the shard's dust, gathered in a linen pouch, and poured it into the surf. Silver motes swirled, then vanished. Whatever river remained, it would mingle now with all waters, too thin to wield. Footsteps. She turned. Jon stood, snowwolf mantle exchanged for plain leather. He'd arrived an hour earlier on swift sloop, fearing what letters couldn't speak. He looked older, but eyes clearer, guilt thawed by evidence of mercy. Done? He asked. She nodded. Bran helped. At the end, he showed me how to break the wheel without breaking the world. Jon reached and clasped her shoulder. What now? She gazed north, where the night coolness carried a promise of frost, yet not of dread. Now dawn is just a word again. And we decide what its next verse sounds like. He smiled, a curve both Stark and Targaryen. Come home. For a while, she answered. But rivers reach sea. I'll wander again one day. When you do, he said, leave a trail of broken wheels behind. They laughed quietly. Overhead, stars glittered sharp, no longer veiled by wintry haze. To the east a new star brightened, comet or planet returning after long eclipse. It pulsed faintly, white-blue, but not with ice, rather with possibility. Arya resheathed Dawn. In the reflective steel of its pommel, the star winked, seemed to travel across the facet like a ship over ocean. She breathed slow, let the last vestige of knot inside unwind, and knew for the first time since the gods would that silence could be companion, not warning. Somewhere far inland, in an anonymous grove of summer oaks, the leaves rustled though no blew. A solitary raven tilted its head, black eyes bright. It gave one soft croak, question or farewell, and took flight toward the breaking light. The river was sea now. The tide had turned, and on the horizon, the edge of dawn glimmered wide enough for dreamers and kings, and even little cats of silent footsteps, to find a place beneath its broadening fire. All clean. Beneath a rising dawn, the salt winds of Old Town carried both new life and faint memories of grief. Ships rolled at anchor in the harbor, crews singing in languages from the free cities and the summer isles, while dragons wheeled overhead casting shadows across the roofs of the citadel, the Hightower, and the starry sept's patched domes. In the markets, peasants with sunburnt faces traded turnips for lamp oil, and the braziers in every square glowed orange, no longer blue or green, and no longer fed by the desperate rites of red priests or the fearsome shimmer of ice shards. The nights had gone quiet, the fevered dead no longer walking. Children laughed at the splashes of silver fish in the honey wine, tossing crusts and coins alike. The war for the living and for the soul of the world was ended, at least for now. Arya walked the dockside with Dawn across her back. The sword sheathed in plain leather now, unremarkable save for the faint pearlescent luster, visible only in slanting light. No eyes followed her with suspicion anymore. Some recognized her and bowed, murmuring, Lady Stark or Breaker of Shadows. She shook her head politely and moved on. Always watching, always listening, as if the ghosts of the shards might slither back from the foam or the cracks in Old Town's ancient stone. She passed Gendry at the forges. He was laughing, black hair soaked with sweat, arms corded with labor as he bent new nails for shipwrights. For a moment, She watched the muscles play along his shoulders, the ease with which he turned fearsome strength to gentle work. He noticed her, grinned, and she tossed him an apple. "Don't break too many hearts, Lord Baratheon." He caught the fruit and bit it in two, juice running down his chin. "What about yours, Lady Stark?" She made a face at him, turning before the blush could rise, and continued toward the steps where Samwell Tarly waited with Maester's chains gleaming, his cheeks rounder, eyes ever kind. He had rescued a wagon-load of books from the starry septs burning. Histories of the long night, treatises on fire and ice, riddles of the first men and the children. They sat on benches with Nymeria Dane, Orn Norvoshi, and a cluster of new recruits for the Order of Dawn Wardens, passing scrolls from hand to hand, arguing softly about what truth might be rescued from legend. Arya set Dawn on the table and let them debate, only half listening, her eyes drawn always to the sunlit tide, where the ships bobbed and the sea promised roads home. Daenerys had not yet sailed. She lingered in the Hightower's highest rooms, advising Lord Hightower, rebuilding what could be saved, and, some said, healing a wound in herself, no less deep than the scars left on Rhaegal's scales. She held audiences daily, listening to townsfolk, sending casks of clean water and dried beans up the river in dragon-guarded convoys. The realm was not hers, not yet, but in Old Town. At least she was queen by consent, not by flame. Arya had seen her ride through the market at dusk, unguarded but for Drogon overhead, talking quietly with traders and weeping women. There was steel beneath the gentleness now, a kind of peace neither Targaryen nor dragon had ever found before. Arya wondered if it would last. From the east, ravens brought news. The free cities, Braavos, Lys, Volantis, offered supplies and envoys. In Dorne, Lady Nymeria's kin swore to join the new Order of Dawn Wardens, sending 50 riders to patrol the coast and the rivers for any spark of returning ice. Across the sea, the Iron Bank wrote that stability breeds trade and offered coin in exchange for the safe passage of merchants. In the north, Jon and Sansa sent word of good harvests, of old enmities mended by necessity, and the direwolves running again in the Godswood. There were tales of a great wolf queen who patrolled the wilds with her pack, and of Jon himself sitting in council with wildlings and lords alike, brokering peace. Yet not all was rest. At night, Arya sometimes woke to the echo of blue light on stone, or the voice of Bran calling across a dark river. The sea never forgets. She wondered, as she often had, if a part of the Night King's essence was now scattered in every living thing, diluted to harmlessness, or simply waiting, patient as winter, for memory to fade. Once, she thought she saw a faint blue gleam at the base of the Hightower's oldest stone, but when she pressed Dawn to it, there was nothing, just dust and cold. It was in the high summer of that year that Daenerys called her closest allies together for council in the Hightower's council chamber. Light streamed through colored glass, painting the marble in dappled hues. Nymeria Dane sat at Daenerys' right, Samwell at her left, Gendry, Sansa, fresh from her journey south. Tyrion and Sir Davos made a semicircle with Arya, who stood silent and alert by the window where Drogon's shadow sometimes glided across the glass. "The realm is wounded," Daenerys began, "but healing. Old Town will need 100,000 hands to be rebuilt. The north holds, the Reach will recover, but the Riverlands are flooded and the Westerlands splintered. Cersei's supposed son has fled to the Stormlands. No great lord supports his claim. I can fly to each corner and demand homage. Or I can stay and show the world that peace is not the gift of terror." Needy. Tyrion tapped his fingers. "You may find the former easier. Lords are like cats. They obey while you watch, but plot the moment you turn away." Sansa smiled. "Then let them plot, so long as they don't burn the world. We Starks learned long ago the value of patience." Gendry shrugged. "I'll send grain north as soon as my new smithies are running. The Baratheon name still means something to the Marches, and if the Stormlands rebel, I'll remind them the hammer is still strong." Nymeria watched Daenerys. "The dawn is not only a blade, it is a promise. If you keep it, others will remember." Sam spoke, voice trembling with hope. We must share what we've learned. Of the shards. Of the magic that nearly broke the world. Let the Citadel no longer hoard knowledge for power, but teach it for the realm's safety. I will stay, if you'll have me, and help found a new order. A school, not a priesthood. Oh, war. Daenerys smiled, her eyes soft but unwavering. Then let the Maesters of Dawn be born. They made plans to repair the walls, to send envoys to every corner of the realm, to teach children not only letters but the warning tales of ice and fire, to end, finally, the old cycles of revenge. It was not a grand council. There was no iron throne, only a sunlit table and the soft scrape of pen on parchment. But Arya felt for the first time that the world was turning toward morning, not dusk. Later, on the tower's open balcony, Arya and Sansa watched the sun fall toward the sea, the last rays painting Drogon's wings gold as he soared over the rooftops. Sansa leaned into her sister, sighing. "Will you stay, Arya? The North needs you, even now." Arya shook her head. "Not yet. I want to see what lies beyond the summer sea, past Ashai. If there's any shadow left to hunt, I'll find it." Sansa laughed softly, tears shining in her eyes. "If you see Father, tell him we're all right, that the pack endured." Arya smiled, holding her sister tight. "We always do." That winter came late and gentle, the first in memory without famine or slaughter. Dragons nested on Dragonstone, and at Old Town's rebuilt ramparts. Their fire only for warmth, and their flights a symbol, not a threat. The wildlings who had settled in the Gift built villages and planted rye. Jon visited each, riding Ghost, and saw his people. Wild and Southron, highborn and low, sharing the land. In the Riverlands, old lords and new tenants raised barns together, and in the Reach, Lady Brienne commanded a host of knights sworn to guard the road and the field, not the throne. Arya's own journey took her farther than she had imagined. She sailed on a Braavosi ship, called the Dawn's Gift, bound for the Summer Isles, with Dawn sheathed in a trunk beneath her bunk, and a letter of passage signed by Daenerys and sealed with 3 sigils: Wolf, Dragon, and Falling Star. Gendry saw her off at the harbor, pressing a ring into her palm. "If you find your way back, I'll be at Storm's End, or Winterfell, if the hammer falls heavy again." She smiled, tucking the ring into her pouch. "Don't wait too long. I run faster than most men ride." "Men?" "There." At first, the voyage was all wind and spray, the world growing greener and stranger each league south. In the ports of Satharios and the Jade Sea, she found hints of old magic, tattoos that glowed in moonlight, singers who told of blue-eyed demons long ago defeated, but never wholly gone. She listened, learned, sometimes drew Dawn to shatter a cursed token, or comfort a child with only a promise and a story. No new Night King rose, no ancient river stirred beneath the soil. But everywhere she went, she found people who had heard of the breaking of the shards, and who looked to the east and the west with hope, not dread. Back in Westeros, Samwell Tarly's Maesters of Dawn began to gather students, orphans, wildlings, the sons and daughters of hedge knights, even girls in silk who would once have been forbidden the Citadel's gates. They wrote new histories, taught old languages, and sent messengers to every holdfast with word that, should any trace of blue ice or red flame return, the world would not fight alone. Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell and Queen in the North, ruled from the heart of a rebuilt castle, her council a motley of old names and new: Tormund Giantsbane, Davos Seaworth, Lady Lyanna Mormont, and even in time, a Stark cousin from the Free Folk. Under her care, the North bloomed in wild and unexpected ways. Snow fell and melted, seasons turned, and the wolves of the Godswood hunted and howled beneath ancient boughs that bled only sap, not sorrow. Daenerys Targaryen, breaker of chains and now of cycles, never took the Iron Throne. The Red Keep remained empty, the swords of old enemies left to rust or melt into plowshares. Instead, she traveled city to city, healing, building, refusing crowns offered by acclamation. She wrote letters to Jon, sometimes asking if he missed the firelight of the wall, sometimes simply describing the market's noise or the faces of children, growing up unafraid. Her dragons lived long, siring clutches that would not serve armies but watched over fields and rivers as guardians. For the first time in living memory, the word dragon became a blessing. And Arya, across the world, found a kind of rest. In a coastal city ringed by blue mountains and pearl-white beaches, she hung Dawn on a nail above her bed and learned the speech of fishermen. She danced with spear wives and sword saints, faced pirates and wind witches, and wrote home with tales that sounded like legend. In time, she grew older, her eyes no less sharp, but her heart gentler. She never saw another blue shard. Once, though, she dreamed of Bran sitting beside a river, building a bridge of ice, then letting it melt beneath the touch of sunlight. "We are all rivers," he said. "We all reach the sea." Years passed, and the world changed. The Maesters of Dawn grew in number and in wisdom. The Wardens of Dawn kept watch, and the songs of old heroes became songs of warning, not of worship. Children played in the streets of Old Town and King's Landing alike, learning not to fear the night. In the north, wildlings and Southrons hunted side by side, and the gods' woods grew thicker, home to crows and wolves and foxes unafraid. Jon Snow, no longer king nor wolf alone, became legend, called the White Peace, the brother who bound the world together with no crown, but the trust of men and women tired of blood. He visited every corner, from the rills to Sunspear, never staying long, but always welcome. He carried no sword, only ghost at his side and the memory of the wars that had been. And Arya, in her turn, returned to Westeros at last. She rode up the King's Road as a stranger, with her hair streaked in silver, and paused beneath the arch of Winterfell's rebuilt gate. Sansa greeted her with tears and laughter, and Ghost, old but proud, pressed his gray muzzle to her shoulder. The pack endured. In the Godswood, Arya knelt and pressed Dawn's tip to the roots of the heart tree. "If there are shadows left, we can bear them," she said softly. "But let the light be ours for a while." That evening, as the feast hall glowed with candlelight, and the snow fell gentle outside, Arya told stories to the children, of dragons and wolves, of rivers and stars, of the day the Night King was defeated, but the shadow lingered, and how the light finally prevailed. Gendry poured wine, Sansa smiled, and in every face, scarred or laughing, young or old, Arya saw the dawn she had fought for shining back at her. Far away, in the deeps of the sea where no light ever reached, a tiny colorless stone slept beneath layers of silt and coral, unmarked, undreamed of by any living soul. Sometimes when the current shifted, it trembled faintly, remembering a time when it was the heart of night. But the sea was wide and the world warm, and the stone did not stir. And so, with the wheel broken, the world healed. Not all at once, not without scars, but steadily, as rivers heal the land, as light returns after longest night. For the river was now sea, and the dawn that followed was not a sword or a crown, but the simple, stubborn hope of those who had endured, and dreamed, and dared to begin again. In that dawn, Arya Stark stood by the window of her old bedchamber, Dawn across her knees, and watched the sun rise over Winterfell's walls. The world was not safe, nor ever would be, but for the first time, it was enough. The pack endured, the world endured, and the light was theirs. A hush settled over Westeros. In the corners of the world, storm-battered headlands, frost-gnawed forests, distant mountains, old stories lingered, told by grandmothers who remembered the blue-eyed winter and the fiery queen. But in most hearts, the fear was gone. The Night King was a memory, the wheel that ground kings and beggars alike had broken. There would be new threats and new heroes, but the lesson remained. Together, the living could overcome the darkness, not with magic or dragons alone, but with the light they carried each for each. And so the story faded into legend, and legend into song, and song into silence, until only those who truly remembered could say where truth ended and hope began. Arya Stark, breaker of shadows, sailed again in her twilight years, alone her hair white as snow and eyes bright as ice. Some say she vanished into the mist beyond Ashai. Others that she walked into the sea at last and became a gull, forever searching, forever free. But in the north, at Winterfell, the heart tree grew tall and strong, its red leaves whispering in the breeze, and beneath its boughs children still played, and mothers told them that even the longest night yields to dawn. And thus, in the song of the living, the world went on. E.K. Certainly. Here is the continuation, unfolding across years and continents, deeply novelistic. Slow in pace, weaving the fates of those who shaped and survived the long war against shadow. No subtitles, no interruptions, only immersive narrative. It began with a single candle's flicker in the dark. The light, no longer desperate, but simply there, enduring as breath. Dawn had come, not with fanfare but as a thing earned and quietly kept. For Arya, the years after the breaking of the shards moved slowly at first, every day thick with the unfamiliar rhythm of peace. She spent months in Old Town's lower quarters, drinking with sailors, teaching orphans to use the pointy end, and walking the night markets in silent patrol, not as Lady Stark, but as a shadow among shadows. No one called her hero. Children knew her only as the lady with the odd wolf smile who brought bread, a story, and once a carved wooden boat for a fevered boy. She found comfort in routine, in making her way alone along the docks, as the ships rolled and the lights of the Hightower glimmered above. Yet, the quiet did not last. Word came of a merchant prince in Lys claiming to have found the heart of ice washed ashore from the Jade Sea, a gem pulsing with blue fire. South in Dorne, a sand priestess boasted of fire that cannot be quenched, and followers bearing white scars on their hands. In the north, even as Sansa's council built roads and peace, some small folk whispered that a child of Hardhome had been found with a blue splinter lodged in her foot, and though the wound healed, her dreams turned cold and strange. Arya heard these rumors and felt the echo of old dread, not the ancient terror that had crushed her heart in the Godswood, but a subtler sense, the knowledge that the work was not truly done. She waited, she watched, and when the rumors grew thick as spring flies, she took up Dawn and her pack, and slipped away one dawn without ceremony. She rode first to Dorne, crossing hills already dry as bone in the early summer. In Sunspear, she found Lady Nymeria Dane, surrounded by the new Dawn Wardens, her hair bound up in a coronet of polished opal, her eyes sharp with command and care. They drank wine together in the shadowed gardens and spoke of peace. Nymeria confessed to seeing her own reflection in the marble pools, and behind her sometimes, the shade of her brother, Sir Arthur, smiling and sad. "Peace is a garden," she said, "but every gardener fears the first weed." Arya nodded. "I'll pull them out by the root." South, Arya tracked the Sand Priestess to a scorched chapel at the edge of the Greenblood. The priestess greeted her not as foe but as omen, breaker of shadows, the day star in my vision, and knelt, presenting a splinter of white-hot glass that steamed and spat even in her gloved hand. Arya touched Dawn to it. The splinter cracked. A pale sigh shivered through the sand, and a single white lily bloomed where it fell. The priestess wept and followed Arya to the water, washing her hands in the river, declaring herself warden of lilies, not flames. Arya left her with a kiss on the brow, and a warning that faith should never burn what it cannot heal. In Lys, she found the merchant prince was a charlatan. The so-called Heart of Ice was a polished sapphire, nothing more. Yet the tale had drawn thieves, magicians, and more than one iron banker seeking leverage. Arya played the game as she had learned in Bravos. Faceless, voiceless, quick with coin and quieter with steel. She left the prince alive, but his confidence shaken. The heart ground to dust and poured into the city's fountain. Lys learned that rumors of ice brought only disappointment and a lowering of prices. The voyage east took longer. Arya crossed the narrow sea in the company of a Volantene captain who called himself Muro, whose crew bore tattoos of ships and cats and the seven-pointed star. They spoke of the old night, of red priests who now preached mercy rather than flame, and of the Ironborn, whose longships had not been seen east of Korth in 2 generations. Arya watched the stars from the deck and dreamed of home, of Sansa's careful wisdom, of Jon's silent strength, of Ghost running the forests, and of Bran's voice, now a memory softer than any wind. Beyond Korth, in the pale green waves of the summer sea, Arya found true magic again. On the Isle of Elephants, children played with marbles that glowed faint blue in moonlight, marbles washed up from a shipwreck years past. Arya tested them, cold, but harmless, their power spent in the ocean's deep. She told the island's chief the story of the Night King, of how light and shadow fought and finally made peace, and bade him keep the marbles in a glass jar by the village gate, to remember what is gone and what must never return. In Asshai, Arya sat in the Temple of Shadows and listened to priests whisper of the river that runs beneath the world. There is always a current, an old priest said, and sometimes, in deepest night, the river forgets its banks and floods the land. But when the sun rises, the river remembers it is water, not ice. Arya nodded, thanked the priest, and left a coin at the shrine of the stranger. She crossed back west in a Summer Isles cog, landing in Old Town one storm-tossed evening. The high tower's lamps glowed yellow, and Samuel met her on the dock, beaming with 3 children in tow. His own, born to Gilly, their hair as unruly as his, and eyes bright with curiosity. He led her to the Maesters of Dawn, now 100 strong, their school a bustle of books, scrolls, and stories. Sam showed her a codex he had written, the Tale of the Shards, and asked Arya to write a chapter. She did, careful and plain, not as legend but as warning. The river of shadow is never ended, but light is not a sword alone. It is the promise we keep with one another, every day. That winter she returned north, to Winterfell. Sansa greeted her with a feast, the hall warm with the laughter of children. Some stark, some free folk, some orphaned in the wars, and taken in by the pack. Ghost, old and grizzled, limped beside the fire, his muzzle white, his eyes gentle. Arya spent nights in her old bedchamber, Dawn propped by the window, and every morning walked the walls in snow, watching the sun climb over the godswood. She found Jon there one morning, sitting with his back to the heart tree. He was older, his hair silvered at the temples, but his eyes were the same, full of storms and kindness. They spoke little at first, then much. Arya told him of the east, of the marbles in the Isle of Elephants, of the river beneath Asshai, and the lilies blooming in Dorne. Jon told her of wildlings come south to farm, of peace with the Ironborn, of how even Lannisters now sent sons to learn beside the children of the North. It is not perfect, he said, but it is better than what was. One night in deep winter, Arya dreamed of Bran. He stood at the edge of a river that reflected not the stars, but the faces of everyone she loved. Sansa, Jon, Gendry, Sam, Gilly, Nymeria, Daenerys, Ghost, Ned, and Catelyn. Even the Hound, smiling despite himself. "We are all rivers," Bran said. "We all reach the sea, but the sea is not the end. It is only another beginning." Arya woke with tears in her eyes and knew that Bran was at peace, somewhere beyond, watching and smiling. Spring came at last, soft and green, and with it, the children of the North spilled into the fields, chasing lambs and crows. Arya taught the youngest to shoot arrows, to read the stars, to tell stories of dragons and wolves, not as weapons, but as friends. When the time came for her to leave again, because restlessness was in her bones, as much as hope, she walked to the godswood, pressed her palm to the heart tree and whispered, "Thank you." The wind shifted, red leaves fluttering like the wings of crows. She set out once more, not alone this time, but with Gendry at her side, and a pack of orphans who had become a family, quick and clever, ready to carry news and hope from one end of Westeros to the other. They rode south, then east, and everywhere she went, she listened for rumors of blue fire, watched for the flicker of shadow, and taught whoever would learn how to resist both. The world was not safe, nor ever would be, but it was no longer ruled by fear. Daenerys, growing older and still beautiful as sunrise, became a legend in her own right, the Queen of the Dawn. She was rarely seen in one place for long, traveling with her dragons to every corner of the world, healing, building, comforting, sometimes fighting, but never conquering. In time, when age began to weigh her shoulders, she returned to Dragonstone and watched her children, drakes of black, green and gold, soar across the narrow sea. Sansa's rule brought the North a golden age, not of splendor, but of endurance and warmth. Fields flourished, lords and small folk learned to listen, and in the long nights by the fire, old wounds healed in story and song. Jon, ever restless, rode the wilds with Ghost, bringing peace to the forgotten and hope to the lost. He became a legend not as king, but as peacemaker. The wolf who would not rule, but who would always return. And Arya, the breaker of shadows, the bearer of dawn, lived on in tale and truth. Children learned her name in Old Town, in the North, in the Summer Isles and beyond, but few ever saw her face. Some said she became the stranger, walking the world unseen, righting wrongs and teaching kindness in 100 tongues. Others said she became a wolf at last, running the forests with Ghost's grandchildren, forever young and free. What remained, above all, was the memory that the river of shadow, though it rose again and again, could never swallow the world so long as there were those who watched and waited and chose the light each dawn. That story, quiet, unending, stubborn as spring, was the true legacy of Arya and the pack who endured. Winterfell stood, seasons turned, and the wheel of kings remained broken, when in some far day a shadow did stir again. Whether in the hills of Skagos, the salt marshes of the Neck, or the marble halls of Bravos, there would be hands ready to lift dawn, to teach, to heal, to remember. For the world endured, and the river ran on, and the sea was not the end. Ready for as much continuation as you wish. Just say the word. Kan. The world became slow, after all the burning. The pulse of crisis faded, and its echo stretched across the years not as thunder, but as a low, persistent wind. The last of the blue shards ground to powder. The last of the priesthoods broken or changed. The last of the fevered dead consigned to quiet earth. In every city, in every village, small stories returned. Of crops and children, and the small, hard bargains of life. Those who had survived the long war looked up, blinked, and found themselves not in legend, but in the gentle, daunting day of what came after. Arya Stark, the breaker of shadows, found no place she could settle, though she tried. She was neither restless nor hunted, simply attuned to movement, to the need for vigilance and witness. She could not sleep beneath the same ceiling for more than a handful of nights, not even in Winterfell, not even when Ghost nosed his great silvered head onto her lap, or when Sansa pressed a goblet of mulled wine into her hands. Home, she realized, was not a hearth or hall but a promise, that she would not let the long shadow creep unseen. At first her leaving was silent and solitary. She left by the east gate, past the stables and the kitchen yard, with only Dawn at her back and a bundle of bread and cheese. Later, Sansa would find the note Arya left tucked in the weirwood's roots. The world is wide. If I do not wander, who will warn when winter stirs? I'll come back. I always do. She wandered the north. Quiet hamlets where she sat at a table by the fire, listening to old men tell stories and children sing. Sometimes there was a rumor, a blue light flickering in the woods, a cold that would not lift from a single field. She would stay, sometimes a night, sometimes a moose turn, and help as she could, pulling a half-frozen shard from a sheep's hoof, laying a hand on the brow of a child who dreamed too cold. Sometimes all that was needed was a story, told low by candlelight, to remind the frightened that not all magic wished to rule them. South she rode, through the green plains of the Reach, where Lady Brienne's order of knights kept the roads. They would salute her, sometimes awkwardly, for her fame lingered even in these gentle lands. She dined in halls where no one called her lady, where her name was only a story children repeated as they repeated tales of the Dawn Wardens and Queen Sansa's laws. She drank with hedge knights and midwives, learned songs in 6 dialects, and left gifts. A knife here, a net mended there, a child's slate with a sketch of a wolf, a dragon, and a star. When spring came, Arya rode east, crossing the storm-broken bridges of the Trident, where the old river gods seemed to blink their mossy eyes at her. In River Run she met Edmure Tully. Older, his beard streaked white, his children grown tall and wary. He ruled with a quiet patience, letting the farmers rebuild dikes, teaching the new lords, many born in war's chaos, to speak gently and listen longer. Arya stayed a month in his hall, teaching the youngest to ride and the eldest to run a blade along a whetstone. She helped repair a library burnt in the last war, reading aloud from half-charred books until the script ran out. But it was not only peace she found. In the ruined towers west of Lannisport, the gold was gone, but a different treasure lingered. Refugees, wildlings who had come so far south that the sea was the end of their wandering. Arya sat with them by beach fires, sharing salted cod, and told them of the North's fields, now open to all who worked them. She guided a dozen families north in secret, leading them across old bandit roads, sleeping under pine and hawthorn. She did not ask what wrongs or hopes sent them fleeing. She gave them what she could. Directions, a word for the guards at the neck, the memory of her silent smile. Sometimes, on the coldest nights, Arya felt the presence of those she had lost. Bran, in her dreams, watched her from beside a river, his eyes warm now, no trace of blue. He would speak riddles, or sometimes say nothing at all, only smiling and tossing pebbles into the water. Arya woke from those dreams lighter and less afraid. When summer burned hot, she sailed south to the arbor, where the Maesters of Dawn kept a library in the old lighthouse. Sammo was there, older, rounder, but ever bright-eyed. Gilly laughed when Arya arrived, her children now near grown, racing through the vineyards and learning to read the stars. Arya taught them to move quietly, to track by night, and they taught her the names of birds that nested in the grape arbors. Sam pressed a copy of his newest book into her hands, A History of Hope. Arya smiled, promising to read it on the road. As she left, Sam gave her news from across the sea. In the Summer Isles, a temple had been raised to the god of rivers, a gentle faith welcoming all who wandered. The isle's priests had found washed-up blue stones, shattered by the sea, and ground them to powder, mixing them into their ink so every prayer written glowed softly before fading. "We are all rivers," the priestess writes. Sam translated. No river is lost, only changed. It was in those years that Arya learned the cost of peace was vigilance. The world, mended but never perfect, produced new dangers. Sometimes war threatened. A petty lord in the Stormlands raised a banner of fire, claiming kinship with dragon blood, but the people would not follow, and the fire guttered before it could catch. Sometimes it was plague, sometimes drought, but never again the old chill of unnatural ice. Through it all, Arya carried Dawn, but rarely drew it. Its glow was softer now, the blade cool, more silver than pearl, more moon than star. She sometimes wondered if, with the last blue shards gone, Dawn was only a sword again. But when she pressed it to the palm of a fevered girl near Duskendale, or laid it beside a dying wolf at Moat Cailin, she felt a pulse, a gentle reassurance, not magic, but memory. The promise remained. One winter, Arya returned to Winterfell for a feast. Sansa's hair was silvering, her voice deepened with authority, her laugh rich. Jon was there, older and lean, with wildlings and wolves alike sitting at his feet. Gendry, now Lord Baratheon, arrived in a storm, his laughter unchanged by the weight of years. The hall rang with music and tales, of ships returned from the Jade Sea, of dragons nesting in the ruins of Harrenhal, of children learning to ride and rule and read. There were no blue-eyed shadows at the windows, only snow and the red flicker of the heart trees leaves beyond. Arya watched as Sansa's grandchildren played tag beneath the tables, as Gendry's son challenged a Stark girl to arm wrestle, as Sam's youngest sang a song of the river that reached the sea. She thought, as she always did, of those who were not there. Bran, Ned, Catelyn, the Hound, even Daenerys, now old and rarely seen but sometimes writing letters from Dragonstone, her dragons grown gentle, her rule more myth than law. After the feast, Arya stood at the battlements with Jon. The night was full of snow, the sky clear as glass. "You could stay," Jon said, not for the first time. Arya smiled. "And let the world go unguarded? Never. Besides, you know me. I'm no lady of halls." Jon chuckled. "You're the last wolf running." "Not the last," Arya said, nodding to the howls echoing from the woods. "There's always another. Somewhere." Before dawn, she left again, leaving only a kiss on Sansa's brow. A whispered word to the heart tree. A promise to return. In the years that followed, Arya's journeys became legend. In the Vale, they told of the hooded stranger who saved a village from spring floods, then vanished. In the Stormlands, children recited rhymes about the Lady of Dawn who healed the sick and left behind a feather from her cloak. Across the narrow sea, in the Isles of the Summer Sea and the market squares of Braavos, her name was a story. Arya, breaker of shadows, the friend of the lost and the wary. Once, in her old age, Arya found herself in Braavos again. The city had changed, grown taller, stranger, its canals crowded with ships from every corner of the world. She visited the House of Black and White, the place of faces, and left an offering for those who taught her. She sat beside the canals and listened to the bells ring, and saw her own reflection. Hair streaked with white lines at the corner of her eyes, but her gaze still sharp, her smile still sly. A boy sat beside her, watching the gulls. "Are you lost?" he asked. Arya shook her head. "Never. I just walk a longer road." He grinned. "Are you someone important?" She considered. "No more than anyone, maybe less." He leaned close, as if sharing a secret. "My mother says you're a hero." Arya laughed, low and quiet. "Tell your mother heroes are only stories we tell to remember what must never be forgotten." The boy nodded, solemn, and wandered away. That night, Arya dreamed of the river, of Bran standing in the shallows, stones in hand. "It ends and begins," he said, tossing a pebble. "There is no final shore, only 1,000 small arrivals." She woke before dawn, wrapped Dawn in old leather, and walked to the docks. She watched the sun rise, gold and shy, and let its warmth fill her bones. The world endured. The wheel was still broken, though new cogs were always turning, and the long shadow waited, patient, in the cracks of every piece. But so long as there were those who watched, and wandered, and remembered, the darkness never ruled alone. Years later, in the God's Wood of Winterfell, a child, no one could remember whose, found a weathered blade resting against the heart tree, its hilt worn smooth, its surface still catching the light in a shimmer of pearl. The child called to her mother, and together they brought the blade to Sansa, old and bright-eyed, who laughed and wept to see it. "Dawn returns with the morning," Sansa said, and hung the blade above the high seat where every guest, wildling or lord, could see and remember. And so the story ran on. The river and the sea and the stubborn light that outlives every night. The end was never an ending, only another turning, only another dawn. Ah, Aish. Seasons passed as gentle as the first hush after a storm. The world remembered how to breathe again. For every scar, green returned, slow in the north, fierce in the south. The scars of war and shadow softened, not vanished but overgrown, woven into life's common cloth. In the Reach, harvest crept back, and the ruins of Highgarden echoed with music and laughter at summer's end. In Dorne, laughter and flowers replaced bonfires and fevers, and the water gardens were busy with children's shouts. In the north, snow lingered longer, but hope warmed every hall. Sansa Stark ruled Winterfell not with fire and blood, but with stories, justice, and the quiet strength of patience. She remembered every loss, but she carried them as a cloak, not as chains. When her first grandchild was born, the midwife said the babe did not cry at the cold, and Sansa only smiled. She knows she's home. Jon Snow, the White Piece, wandered often, Ghost his constant companion. Some nights he was seen by wildling fires, helping with a hunt or sharing bread. Some nights he rode as far as Skagos or the Lonely Light, a shadow on the horizon, a promise that the north would not be left to old fears. He was older and moved with the deliberation of one who has seen the world's worst. But when he smiled, rare but true, it could thaw the grimmest room. Asha Greyjoy made her peace with the sea. The Ironborn no longer reaved, but fished and traded and, slowly, sent their young south to learn new ways. On nights of wild weather, she sat at the prow of her rebuilt Black Wind, telling tales of the storm that had nearly ended everything, of shards and wolves and dragons, and how the tide always returns, but never quite the same. Samwell Tarly's Maesters of Dawn flourished. The old citadel, once secretive and prideful, opened its doors. Wildlings and bastards, daughters and third sons, all studied side by side. In every lesson was woven the memory of the war, for knowledge is the best shield against the night. The tale of the shards, written in Sam's careful hand, was read at every harvest festival and passed from grandmother to child in every tongue of the realm. Gendry Baratheon ruled Storm's End in truth and affection, never seeking glory but always ready to defend. His son, with eyes bright as his mother's, learned both the hammer and the bow. The wild rainstorms battered the stone as always, but now, when thunder rolled, the children would gather at Gendry's hearth to hear the story of the sword called Dawn, and the girl who carried it away to the ends of the world. Daenerys Targaryen, now old, lived quietly on Dragonstone. She kept no court. Some said she could be seen walking the cliffs with her dragons at dusk, looking east as if waiting for the sunrise to bring someone home. Her dragons, grown gentle in her last years, watched over the narrow sea and scattered ships that came with steel in their hearts. She wrote letters to Sansa and Jon, sometimes to Arya, always kind, always ending with, "May you walk in the light." When she died, quietly in her bed with her hand on Drogon's great scaled neck, the dragons vanished for a time, and the waves sang her passing for a month before she was seen again, in the dreams of children across Westeros, silver-haired and smiling, always with the dawn behind her. But the world's memory lingered most keenly on Arya Stark. Her legend grew as her trail faded. Some said she was seen in Qarth, shattering a cursed idol with a sword of moonlight. Some claimed she rescued a band of children from slavers near the Basilisk Isles, appearing as a shadow that cut like dawn and vanished before any thanks could be spoken. Once, in a city of the Jade Sea, a woman in furs and leathers, gray streaking her hair, challenged a bandit lord and left him bound for the mercy of the town. "Tell them Arya Stark guards the roads," she said, and was gone. In Westeros a generation passed. The North's children played Arya and the Night King in the snows. In the Reach, stories of the girl with the wolf and the sword were as common as nursery rhymes. At Winterfell, every year at the first thaw, Sansa ordered a day of feasting and games, when orphans and lords' daughters alike were invited to hunt, ride, and learn the blade. At the end, they would all gather beneath the heart tree as the old sword Dawn was brought out for each child to touch. A promise that light endures, even in little hands. Once, when Sansa was old, a wandering woman arrived at the gate, her cloak tattered and her boots worn, her hair nearly white with wind and time. She smiled at the guards and gave her name only as Cat. The wolfhounds did not bark. The housekeeper saw her standing in the Godswood at dusk, her hand resting on the heart tree, lips moving in silent prayer. Sansa came to her there alone. They did not speak for a long time, not with words. When they did, it was as sisters, one who stayed and healed, one who wandered and watched. That night, they sat in Sansa's solar, sharing bread and honey, speaking of all that had been and would be. Arya's eyes were old and clear, seeing farther than any window, and Sansa's voice was strong, as it had always been. "Will you stay?" Sansa asked, as she had many times. Arya smiled, a curl in her lips that was neither sadness nor joy, but something deeper. "Not for long. There is always another path. But I'll return, as the dawn always returns. I just need to know the light is kept here, with you." Sansa squeezed her hand, and they sat in the firelight, as wolves howled far beyond the walls. That winter, Arya remained in the north longer than any time since the Great War. She taught Sansa's great-grandchildren how to run in the woods, to vanish in snow, to see by starlight. She sat with Jon by the fire as Ghost, old and gray-muzzled, snored at their feet. They spoke of Bran, of the river that was the world, and the sea that was never an end. Jon's hair was white, his eyes clear, and his laugh still the same as it was when they were children. When spring came, Arya gathered her pack. They stood at the gate, Sansa weeping as she always had, Jon smiling a wolf smile, and the children, young wolves all, crowding to see her go. "You will always have a place here," Sansa said. "And I will always find my way home," Arya answered. She vanished into the wild, a shadow among birches and pines. Some said she sailed to the west, beyond the maps. Some said she became a ghost in the hills, watching over travelers, warning them with a whisper or a footprint in fresh snow. In Bravos, at the House of Black and White, the kindly man told his last apprentices that the Lady of Faces had walked the world and found it worth saving. Years later, when the oldest in Winterfell had grown too slow to chase the children, a sword appeared at the foot of the heart tree. It was not Dawn, it was Needle, slender, light, its hilt worn smooth by years of use. Tied to it was a scrap of parchment, for the next one who runs faster than fear. The children found it first. They took it to Sansa, old and bright-eyed, and together they hung it in the hall beside Dawn. Visitors, lords, wildlings, traders, even Ironborn, would pause there, silent, to look at the two blades, one slender as a promise, one broad as the horizon. "Two swords for two roads," they would say. "One to cut the darkness, one to remind us that hope is swift and sly." So time passed. The world spun on, mending and breaking and mending again. New winters came and were endured. New summers bloomed and faded. When trouble rose, bandits in the Vale, pirates on the narrow sea, a fever that crept through the wilds, someone always answered. Not with magic, but with memory and courage, with kindness, with a stubborn refusal to let the long night return. And in every corner of Westeros, from the white cliffs of the Fingers to the deep woods of the Wolf's Den, children grew tall knowing the story. Not the story of kings or conquerors, but the story of those who had watched and wandered and endured, who broke the wheel and then walked on. Under the heart tree, when the snows fell, the children would sit and tell each other stories of Arya, of Sansa, of Jon and Ghost, of the queen who built more than she burned, of a world that could heal. If only someone kept the light. No ending ever held, but the dawn always came. And somewhere, in the turning of the seasons, in the laughter of children, and the hush of snowfall, in the hush after a storm, the breaker of shadows kept her promise, and the light endured. In the deep hush of the world's healing, after so many years of struggle and watchfulness, the patterns of daily life in Westeros formed a new tapestry. Bright threads woven with the dark, every color deeper for the storms endured. The land itself seemed to remember. Woods grew thicker where flames once scorched. Fields blossomed where whites had marched. And rivers flowed clear and untroubled after carrying the dust of old shadows to the far-off sea. In the north, the days lengthened with each turning season, the white silence of winter slowly giving way to the green pulse of life. In Winterfell's rebuilt halls, laughter became the music of every morning. Sansa moved among her people with sure steps, greeting crofter and lord alike by name, the lines at her eyes testimony to both sorrow and joy. The lords who had survived the last night's terrors were older now, but their sons and daughters had only heard the stories. They grew up wild and bold, not haunted, and when the first snows of a new year fell, it was with excitement and not dread. Jon Snow, sometimes called the White Peace, and sometimes the Ghost King for his habit of vanishing into the wild, became a figure of legend in the high north. The free folk followed his trail, listening to his stories by firelight and teaching him their own. Children of both wildling and northern blood rode by his side, learning to track, to read the wind, to share what the land gave. Ghost, old and white-muzzled, still ran the forests, always returning to Jon's side. His howl a signal and a blessing. When Jon rode to Winterfell, he brought gifts. Strange pelts, the stories of new birds and new friends, even saplings from the farthest woods to plant by the heart tree. Every visit he shared long hours with Sansa, sometimes in council, sometimes in silence beneath the red leaves. And the folk of the north said that peace was never so deep as when the two Starks walked together. In Old Town, the Maesters of Dawn remade the world in quieter ways. Samwell, grown broad and slow, but undiminished in spirit, presided over a council of Maesters and Dawn Wardens, every one of them marked by learning and loss. The old secrecy of the Citadel had given way to something open and generous. Every year, a new cohort arrived. The daughters of stonemasons, the sons of crofters, wildling girls with fierce eyes, even the occasional ironborn boy with scars on his hands and sea salt in his voice. The library now reached from ground to tower's top, its shelves heavy with new wisdom and old. And in the evenings, Sam sat by the doors, telling stories to the children of Old Town, teaching them not only letters, but kindness. The Dawn Wardens rode every road, their star-shaped badges as familiar now as the sigils of great houses. They watched for trouble, not only the return of shadow, but famine, flood, or the cruelty of the powerful. Their presence soothed old fears, but their vigilance kept peace honest, and they remembered Arya's teaching. To watch closely, to speak softly, to never trust in comfort alone. Arya herself, with Dawn at her side, passed in and out of the world's view like a bright, brief star. She returned to Winterfell in the early spring, her hair shot through with gray, her eyes still clear as new ice. She came unheralded, on foot, carrying a knapsack and a scattering of new scars. She spent her days among the children, teaching some to ride, others to vanish in the woods, still others to read the stars. When she walked in the Godswood, every red leaf seemed to turn toward her. She and Sansa would sit long into the night, Sansa's granddaughters drowsing at their feet. They spoke of the world's changes, of the long years since the last war, of the small and large ways in which people mended what was broken. Sansa confided her worries about a new drought in the Barrowlands, about a quarrelsome lord in White Harbor, about the loneliness of rule as her children took on burdens of their own. Arya listened, her answers rarely advice but always a story. Of a fisherman in Lace who had lost his way but found a friend. Of a girl in the Stepstones who sailed the sea alone and returned with pearls for every sister she met. At the end of the moon's turning, Arya prepared to leave again. Sansa, old now but no less a queen, hugged her tightly, as if to keep her in place by will alone. "Will you ever rest?" Sansa whispered. "Not while the road still calls," Arya answered. "But when I'm weary I'll come home." Before dawn, Arya slipped away, leaving a ring of dawn-wrought silver by her bed. A wolf's head carved into it, her promise to return. Her travels grew longer with each passing year. Across the Riverlands, she rode with the Duskwatch, descendants of Sandor Clegane's squires, and the old knight himself, who was buried beneath a cairn of river stones by Arya's own hand. In the Vale, she helped break a siege at the Bloody Gate, climbing the cliffs with a band of orphans and surprising the besiegers with a rain of apples and honeycakes stolen from their own supply lines. In the Westerlands, she tracked a false priest who used the name of Old Shadows to steal from the desperate, and sent him limping to the coast with a note pinned to his back. "Beware those who profit from fear." Arya Stark. At times she sailed east, across the narrow sea. Braavos had changed, but not in spirit. The House of Black and White welcomed her with quiet reverence, and Arya spent days there in meditation, leaving behind a face, her own, aged and smiling for the hall's quiet collection. In the markets, she saw children playing it, the many-faced god, giggling as they swapped wooden masks and told each other stories of kindness rather than vengeance. Her journeys took her farther than any Westerosi before her. On the shores of the summer sea, she learned the language of islanders, danced with spearwives, shared laughter with old women who remembered the last blue stones washing up from distant storms. She found no magic left in those stones, only a story's shadow, And when a fisherman's child asked her if the river would ever freeze again, she smiled and said, "Only if we forget to share the fire." In the stormy halls of Storm's End, Gendry ruled with the calm of a blacksmith and the cunning of a lord. They met from time to time, drinking mead beneath the banners of Baratheon and Stark. Gendry's children and grandchildren ran wild in the yards, and he listened with pride as Arya told stories of dragons, wolves, and the lessons of war. Sometimes, late at night, they walked the ramparts together, no words needed between them. As the years wore on, Arya's legend grew beyond her life. In Dorne, the children left sunflowers at Dawn Warden's shrines. In Old Town, the maesters debated whether she was a myth or a messenger of the old gods. In the north, parents named their daughters for Arya and told them not to fear the dark. But Arya herself was never still. She grew older, her hair whitening, her steps slowing but never losing its certainty. She walked with a limp from an old wound taken on the road to Skagos, and a scar ran along her jaw, where a would-be robber in the Free Cities learned, too late, to respect the quiet woman with a wolf's smile. One final time, Arya returned to Winterfell in high summer. The hall was full, children and grandchildren, wardens and wildlings, maesters and merchants from a dozen lands. Sansa was gone, her seat kept warm by a granddaughter who wore her calm like a cloak and her smile like a sword. Jon had vanished into the deep wild, but word came that he lived still, teaching and learning from the first men and the free folk alike. In the Godswood, Arya knelt beneath the heart tree. She felt every year, every mile, and knew she was home. She stayed a season, long enough to see the last harvest, the first snows, the great hall lit by autumn's fire. When the time came, she placed Dawn, worn, bright, humble, on the altar beneath the heart tree. She left her pack, her boots, her ring, all her burdens. One morning, the children woke to find her gone. No one saw her leave, though some swore a white wolf's shadow crossed the field in the mist. Her passage left only stories, and a peace that seemed to run deeper than the frost. Seasons turned. Dawn remained in the Godswood, sometimes brought to the great hall for ceremonies and stories, sometimes left to gleam in dappled light among the roots. Needle too stayed, on the wall above the hearth, reminder and promise. Time, as always, moved forward. The children grew, the world changed, sometimes swiftly, sometimes so slow that only the oldest trees noticed. Shadows rose now and again, as shadows always do, but always there was someone who remembered how to watch, how to run, how to hope. Arya's lessons lingered, quiet vigilance, a hand extended rather than a sword, a story told to keep the night at bay. In the end, Arya Stark became the shape of hope in the heart of the world, a memory that sharpened with need, softened with peace, and never quite faded, even as the oldest of those who had known her passed into storm. Dawn and Needle endured, and so did the light they had carried. Under the heart tree, in the deepest winter, a little girl pressed her hand to the old sword and whispered, "I'll run fast. I'll watch close. I'll remember." The wind, in the red leaves, answered with a sigh that might have been a name, or a blessing, or the laughter of someone gone only just ahead. And so the world spun on, its scars softened, its dangers real, its stories richer for every dawn endured. No end, only the next day, the next child, the next promise to keep the night away. Okay. The great wheels of time spun onward, and as the years drew out across Westeros, life deepened into the grain of the land and the bones of those who lived and remembered. Peace did not mean stasis, nor did the passage of the long shadow mean that darkness would never gather again. But what had changed, what was forever changed, was the world's answer to that darkness, and the web of kinship that bound the living, from the oldest mountain crag to the farthest isle, in ways stronger and subtler than iron or magic. Winterfell stones warmed and cooled with the seasons, holding the memory of centuries. The hall that once echoed with the footfalls of armored men and the clash of war council grew instead to fit the sound of children's feet, the laughter of old friends, the whisper of stories recounted by the hearth. The heart tree, its bark white and ancient, stood at the center of all, watching the coming and going of generations. Its red leaves never faded, but each year seemed to deepen in hue, as if they drew their color from the joy and sorrow, the promise and pain of all the Starks who had leaned their heads against its rough bark and told it their truths. It was said in every corner of the North that so long as one child remembered the story of Arya, the God's Wood would never freeze, nor the heart tree cease to bleed. The tale was told at birthings, at feasts, and at the quiet hours before dawn when mothers rocked restless babes. Children carried wooden swords and played at running the walls, pretending to vanish into the snow and reappear at the enemy's back, as Arya had done in the days of Shadow. Some grew and learned to wield steel for peace, not conquest. Others took up the call of the Dawn Wardens, ranging wide, their white star badges as trusted in the high valleys as in the golden fields of the Reach. Every harvest, the maesters of Old Town, many now trained in the hall Samuel had rebuilt, some with wildling braids or Summer Isles beads among their chains, sent letters up the White Knife and the Green Fork, past the Twins and Moat Cailin to Winterfell, requesting counsel, stories, and sometimes only the blessing of memory. For with each passing decade, it became more clear that history was not the record of kings and battles alone, but a weaving of small kindnesses, swift warnings, and hope. Arya's chapter in the Codex of Dawn was recited in every classroom, and maesters debated endlessly what had become of her. But the children did not question. They simply knew she watched. Once a decade, the houses of the realm gathered for the Peace of Rivers, a great convocation held wherever the land was most in need of mending, sometimes in the orchards of the Reach, sometimes at the foot of the Ares cold towers, often in Winterfell's courts, where the smoke of 1,000 fires drifted to the clouds. The lords and ladies brought grievances and hopes. The farmers and shepherds brought cheese and honey and stories. On the last night, beneath the stars, someone would take up needle from its place over the hearth and tell the tale of the wolf girl who had saved the world and then run on, asking nothing but the promise that all would keep watch. In time, new threats came, as all things do. There were years of drought and the slow creep of blight from Essos, which tested the patience of even the most steadfast. Pirates from the shattered islands of the east raided the Fingers, and once, a would-be conqueror from the south, styling himself the Lion King, sent gold and steel northward, only to find the passes barred by the folk of the hills, the road watched by women and men bearing the Dawn Warden badge, who turned his armies aside without blood. For the land was filled with quiet strength, and the memory of what the cost of fear had once been. The dragons, when they flew, were rare and wondrous sights, but never again the shadow of terror they once were. In Dragonstone, Daenerys' descendants, never ruling, but always welcome, kept the bloodline strong. The drakes raised in peace. Their fire used to light great bonfires in celebration, or to warm villages through the coldest northern nights. Old tales became new in every tongue, the word dragon shifting in the children's minds from fire and ruin to warmth and change. The Maesters of Dawn grew into a great tree themselves, their roots winding through every part of Westeros. They taught reading, healing, the mysteries of the earth, and, above all, how to recognize the return of shadow, should it come. Their order was not merely men, women and men, children of wildlings and nobles alike, even the rare dwarf or exiled Essosi, all learned together. Every year, the tale of the shards was spoken, the lesson clear, that darkness must not be denied, but met and met together. Sansa's line continued. Queens and lords after her, their banners always bearing the dire wolf beneath a dawn star. They ruled with calm and with care, never forgetting the cost of cruelty. Their courts were open to the low as well as the high, and their word was trusted from White Harbor to the Wall. Even in her final days, Sansa watched the rising sun from her chambers, her hand resting on the fur of the oldest wolf, and smiled as children played outside her window. Gendry lived a long life, his children and grandchildren taking his place in Storm's End, forging alliances not in war but in the slow, patient work of trade and protection. When he died, 100 smiths from across the realm built a great pyre, their hammers ringing together in the memory of both the boy who had fled the capital and the lord who had never forgotten what it was to wield a hammer for bread. Jon Snow's fate was spoken in many tongues. Some said he became one with the snows, vanishing at last beyond the wall to be legend among the free folk and the wind. Others swore he still visited the children of Winterfell in wolf form, silent and watchful. The oldest tales, told in the darkest nights, held that he would return when the world needed peace most, bringing with him a pack that howled louder than winter. And Arya, her name slipped into myth. Though the maesters chronicled her journeys, though letters survived in half a dozen languages, all signed with a small drawn wolf. Though children from the Summer Isles to Skago swore to have her, she became something more than a person, something woven through the roots of Westeros. Something woven through the roots of Westeros. Some said she walked the gods' woods still, silent, or sailed the world beyond the maps. Some claimed she became a songbird, others a shadow, a watcher at every crossroad. Every wild place held a story of the woman with the bright blade and the bright eyes, who did not fear the night. But even as her legend grew, her lessons held. Where violence threatened, people remembered to stand together. Where fear crept, someone always told the story of Arya and Dawn, and the long night that had been vanquished not by kings, but by those who watched and acted, and never turned away from kindness or from need. And so, through the slow length of years, the world endured, scarred, changed, always in need of healing, but never again helpless. Every dawn, in Winterfell's yard, the children practiced with wooden swords, racing up the ramparts and laughing, the air alive with hope. When dusk fell and shadows lengthened, the old would sit by the fire, and the youngest would curl at their feet, waiting for the story. It was always the same, and always new. There was a wolf girl once, and she ran farther and faster than any fear, carrying hope across the world. She watched when others slept. She walked when others rested. She taught that light is not in blades or banners, but in the courage to love, to witness, to endure. She is gone, and not gone. She waits wherever kindness is needed. The pack survives, because she runs ahead, and behind, and with us, forever. The snow fell. The fire burned. The story endured, as dawn endures, unbroken, promise after promise kept, wheel after wheel left broken behind. And the children dreamed, knowing the river was the world, the sea not the end, and the light would return. Always for those who remembered and reached for it, together.